Hello, hello, hello! Greetings, salutations! Konnichiwa, and every other form of green across this vast, marvelous multiverse! I am Matsu Quinox, this is Horace, and welcome back, my dear scholars, to Camp Quinox! Hello, hello! Oh! 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 We have guests here! Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness. Did I invite you two? Or did you just sneak out of here? Oh, oh, hello. Oh, hello there, you 20. Congratulations getting first. Hello there, Dr. Zadium. Welcome. Hello there, Father Arson. Thank you for the follow. Oh my goodness. Huh? Are you here? Oh, hello. I'm doing my. Oh no. Kintran, please spare me. And hello there, Wace. Yes, you are. I had to drag you through the woods to get over to the fire, but here you are. And well, you just kind of laid down to sleep. I told you we were going to do this. Told you. Don't you remember? Ah. Wait. Keep my eye on you. It's Coco. Well, gentlemen, why don't you introduce yourselves? I can't talk, can I? Why don't you introduce yourselves to our fair scholars? I mean, you're here at the camp. Our dear campers would like to know who you are. Yes. Thank you, Kintran. Oh, can anyone hear us? Voices? Yulian? Hold on, let me make sure. Oh boy, hold on one second. Oh my goodness. Let me see. Why didn't we... No one knows about the cocoa. Try that. Hold on. I think I know what the problem is. Hold on. Try now. Hello?
Hello.
Okay, there we are.
And then neither of us.
Then neither of you talk. I forgot the settings. Okay, quick summary. I dragged Waste out here from the woods in his sleeping bag. Kintran apparently knocked Waste out with some cocoa, and both of them are invited on my invitation. That's kind of redundant, isn't it? Okay, introductions again.
Once more with feeling.
Once more.
Once more with feeling. Hi, I'm Kintran, and I like to narrate stories. Okay.
Hello everyone, I am from the West. I am a horror and intention YouTuber. I play horror games and I sometimes read horror stories like I'm going to do tonight, and I sometimes do art from time to time.
Oh, well, there, that was quick. That was quick. Oh, hello there, Firefly. Welcome. Speedrun. Oh, are we gonna speedrun this? I mean, I thought this was gonna be a nice.
Oh god, that would be interesting.
Oh my goodness gracious! I mean, could you imagine?
Short story speed reading.
Short stories. You know that make Horace, make a note of that. That'd make a good future stream.
I mean, I offered 60-second fairy tales once, but no one took me up on it.
That would be interesting too. Make
60
it
seconds as in speed, or 60 seconds as in just that's the breadth of it?
Getting the entire story told in 60 seconds.
Oh my goodness
Good Lord.
gracious.
I do a lot of summarization.
That's like the Marcel Proust summarization contest all over again.
It's like freaking like 2-sentence horror stories. It's like, oh, I'm all alone. No, you're not, so nice guy.
You've heard the shortest horror story, science fiction story in the world, right? There's an actual one.
The shortest? No, I haven't. I don't.
Yeah,
think.
it's very, very famous. The last man in the world sat in a room. There was a knock at the door.
I've heard of the space version of that.
Yeah. And then a author whose name I forgot who it was, I think it might have been Fritz Lieber, wrote an entire short story around that single line. With the very obvious twist of how it worked out. Yeah.
So there was actually a series on YouTube that's, well, not YouTube, it was actually on Netflix, that they were doing the 2-sentence stories that
Oh.
made them like a full episode of a story.
How do you
Then at
do
the end, then at the end of it, they would put the two lines up. And
Oh,
that would be it.
jeez. Oh my gosh.
Also, if you want a hilarious time, if anyone has listened to Distractable, they attempted 2-sentence horror stories at one point, and it's one of the funniest things I've ever heard.
Oh my goodness gracious. I'll have to take a look at that afterwards. Once we're out of the woods, of course.
Oh, why would you want to leave the woods?
Well, I got books
Yeah.
back. Well, hold on. This is part of the study, so we already have books in here. So, yeah. I mean, if you look carefully, my dear companions, the trees are actually made of books, literally.
I mean, I did bring some books in my trunk, so I suppose I can pull one out.
Oh, yay! Yeah, we're gonna. I mean, we're here around the campfire. We should tell some stories, don't you think?
Perfect. Place for good scary stories.
Oh yeah. I mean, what better thing to do around a campfire than to
But
tell?
why is your fire orange?
Why is my fire orange?
Usually I'm sitting around a green fire, and
Oh.
it's just a little unusual to see it off color.
Well, that's just the way it is. Arson, how does one make trees out of books? You just do.
Trees make into books, and books make into trees.
Trees,
Same
yeah.
thing.
You just pull one out
Circle
and
of life.
it's a circle of life. Million 20 green for copper. That is true. It is green for copper, but I don't think. Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. Hello there, Darth. Am I gonna regret reading this?
Yeah, maybe.
Kintran, do not, just don't. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm saying don't.
No. How about don't?
Don't.
Okay.
Just don't. Darth.
You know what? You know what?
Don't.
Don't.
Don't. Okay, Darth. Matsu, I had a blonde moment earlier when I crashed your voice chat. You completely forgot you'd be streaming the collab on Twitch. Took me 6. Oh, fuck. Oh, after I realized that I spaced out. Fuck.
It was the Sith Lord thing to do.
You know what?
Even though around it that joke was not fire.
You know what? I quit. I'm out of here.
So, should we tell stories?
Only if I get to eat s'mores while you do.
Well,
And
You get
I see
s'mores
Horace is
too, though.
already roasting the marshmallows, so
Oh yeah, he does like the roasting a little. Of course, everyone likes to roast on this channel. I've noticed.
Yeah, typically.
So, any good stories? Oh, he's back.
I mean, I think I've got a few.
I'd say he's back, but he's silent.
Be quiet.
I'm back. I'm just. My sound is weird tonight. Darth, no.
You don't think I can torture him from here?
But yes, you did ask. Should we read some spooky stories? I think we should.
Yes, yes, just do it. Who wants to go first?
I mean, rock, paper, scissors for it?
Okay. I got scissors.
Paper.
Okay. What do you want? You get
Well, that decided nothing.
that decided nothing. Okay, are we doing this again?
Okay, it is your collab, Matsu. Who would you like to read first? If you need to, you can flip a coin for either myself or Kintran. How about that?
Unfortunately, do I have a coin? Do I even? I do have a coin. Okay. Okay, so who wants heads? Who wants tails?
I think it's only fitting that Kintran gets tails because Kintran has a tail.
Okay, I'm gonna flip the coin. And I flipped it in a way I can't see where it went. Oh my goodness gracious!
That sounds about right.
I lost the coin.
Well, that settles it. Kintran, we both need to read our stories at the same time.
Okay.
Oh my god! Oh god! Everything's falling. Everything's falling. Okay. Okay. So my desk, one of my desk statues fell back upside down. So we'll say that's tails. Kintran, you go
All right.
first.
But
After you,
can
Kintran.
I'd say that's pretty impressive.
It's gone into shells.
Let's see, what's a good one here? I'm kind of flipping through Andrew Lane's Dreams and Ghosts. And
Ooh. Good old Andrew.
let's see. Oh, this one's only a page long. That should be fast.
Okay.
The Old Family Coach. A distinguished and accomplished country gentleman and politician of scientific tastes was riding in the New Forest, some 12 miles from the place where he was residing. In a grassy glade, he discovered that he did not very clearly know his way to a country town, which he intended to visit. At this moment, on the other side of some bushes, a carriage drove along, and then came into a clear view where there was a gap in the bushes. Mr. Hinford saw it perfectly distinctly. It was a significantly antiquated family carriage. The sides were in the imitation of the wickerwork on the green panel, which was so common once. The coachman was a respectable family servant. He drove 2 horses. 2 old ladies were in the carriage. One of them wore a hat and the other wore a bonnet. They passed, and then Mr. Hinford, going through the gap in the bushes, rode after them to ask his way. There was no carriage in sight. The avenue ended in a cul-de-sac of tangled brake, and there were no traces of wheels on the grass. Mr. Hinford rode back to his original point of view and looked for any object which could suggest the illusion of an old-fashioned carriage. 1 coachman, 2 horses, and 2 elderly ladies, 1 in a hat and 1 in a bonnet. He looked in vain, and that was all. Nobody in his senses would call this appearance a ghostly one. The name, however, would be applied to the next table.
Ooh,
Okay, that was an introduction.
that was an interesting one. Bit of a shiver down the spine.
Guess I can go and read the next one. It's a couple of pages.
Hmm. Oh my gosh, Darth, why? Darth, what do you call a sleeping bowl? What do you call a sleeping bowl, Darth? Please, 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 no. A bulldozer. Hello there, Private Maverick. Welcome.
Oh, you had to push that one
Ah, Kintran!
through.
No! Ugh.
Night, spooky stories interjected with jokes from Darth Permulis. Oh my gosh, I butchered that name. Alright.
Like a lamb to the slaughter.
Arson, the dad jokes are everywhere and they are painful. Oh.
Shall I follow, or
Yes.
would you like to read next?
You go, Wastes. As host, I'll go last.
Alright. Now, mine is not quite as brief as Kintran's, but I think you'll recognize it as soon as I start reading it.
Okay.
The Red Death had long devastated the country. No pestilence had ever been so fatal or so hideous. Blood was its avatar and its seal, the redness and the horror of blood. There were sharp pains and sudden dizziness, and then profuse bleeding at the pores, with dissolution. The scarlet stains upon the body, and especially upon the face of the victim, were the pest ban which shut him out from the aid and from the sympathy of his fellow men. And the whole seizure, progress, and termination of the disease were the incidents of half an hour. But the Prince Prospero was happy and dauntless and sagacious. When his dominions were half depopulated, he summoned to his presence 1,000 hale and light-hearted friends from among the knights and dames of his court, and with these retired to the deep seclusion of one of his castellated abbeys. This was an extensive and magnificent structure, the creation of the prince's own eccentric yet august taste. A strong and lofty wall girdled it in. This wall had gates of iron. The courtiers, having entered, brought furnaces and massy hammers and welded the bolts. They resolved to leave means neither of ingress or egress to the sudden impulses of despair or of frenzy from within. The abbey was amply provisioned. With such precautions, the courtiers might bid defiance to contagion. The external world could take care of itself. In the meantime, it was folly to grieve or to think. The prince had provided all the appliances of pleasure. There were buffoons, there were improvisatori, there were ballet dancers, there were musicians, there was beauty, there was wine. All these in security were within. Without was the Red Death. It was toward the close of the 5th or 6th month of his seclusion, and while the pestilence raged most furiously abroad, that the Prince Prospero entertained his 1,000 friends at a masked ball of the most unusual magnificence. It was a voluptuous scene, that masquerade. But first let me tell of the rooms in which it was held. There were 7, an imperial suite. In many palaces, however, such suites form a long and straight vista, while the folding doors slide back nearly to the walls on either hand, so that the view of the whole extent is scarcely impeded. Here the case was very different, as might have been expected from the Duke's love of the bazaar. The apartments were so irregularly disposed that the vision embraced but little more than one at a time. There was a sharp turn at every 20 or 30 yards, and at each turn a novel effect. To the right and left, in the middle of each wall, a tall and narrow Gothic window looked out upon a closed corridor which pursued the windings of the suite. These windows were of stained glass whose color varied in accordance with the prevailing hue of the decorations of the chamber into which it opened. That at the eastern extremity was hung, for example, in blue, and vividly blue were its windows. The second chamber was purple in its ornaments and tapestries, and here the panes were purple. The third was green throughout, and so were the casements. The fourth was furnished and lighted with orange, the fifth with white, the sixth with violet. The seventh apartment was closely shrouded in black velvet tapestries that hung all over the ceiling and down the walls, falling in heavy folds upon a carpet of the same material and hue. But in this chamber only, the color of the windows failed to correspond with the decorations. The panes here were scarlet, a deep blood color. Now in no one of the 7 apartments was there any lamp or candelabrum amid the profusion of golden ornaments that lay scattered to and fro or depended from the roof. There was no light of any kind emanating from lamp or candle within the suite of chambers. But in the corridors that followed the suite, there stood, opposite to each window, a heavy tripod bearing a brazier of fire that projected its rays through the tinted glass, and so glaringly illumined the room. And thus were produced a multitude of gaudy and fantastic appearances. But in the western or black chamber the effect of the firelight that streamed upon the dark hangings through the blood-tinted panes was ghastly in the extreme, and produced so wild a look upon the countenances of those who entered, that there were few of the company bold enough to set foot within its precincts at all. It was in this apartment also that there stood against the western wall a gigantic clock of ebony. Its pendulum swung to and fro with a dull, heavy, monotonous clang, and when the minute hand made the circuit of the face, and the hour was to be stricken, there came from the brazen lungs of the clock a sound which was clear and loud and deep and exceedingly musical, but of so peculiar a note and emphasis that, at each lapse of an hour, the musicians of the orchestra were constrained to pause momentarily in their performance to hearken to the sound, and thus the waltzers perforce ceased their evolutions, and there was a brief disconcert of the whole gay company. And while the chimes of the clock yet rang, it was observed that the giddiest grew pale, and the more aged and sedate passed their hands over their brows as if in confused reverie or meditation. But when the echoes had fully ceased, a light laughter at once prevailed the assembly. The musicians looked at each other and smiled as if their own nervousness and folly, and made whispering vows, each to the other, that the next chiming of the clock should produce in them no similar emotion. And then, after the lapse of 60 minutes, which embraced 3,600 seconds of the time that flies, there came yet another chiming of the clock, and then were the same disconcert and tumultuousness and meditation as before. But in spite of these things, it was a gay and magnificent revel. The tastes of the Duke were peculiar. He had a fine eye for colors and effects. He disregarded the decora of mere fashion. His plans were bold and fiery, and his conceptions glowed with barbaric luster. There are some who would have thought him mad. His followers felt that he was not. It was necessary to hear and see and touch him to be sure that he was not. He had directed, in great part, the movable embellishments of the 7 chambers upon occasion of this great fete, and it was his own guiding taste which had given character to the masqueraders. Be sure they were grotesque. There were much glare and glitter and piquancy and phantasm, much of what has been since seen in Hernani. There were arabesque figures with unsuited limbs and appointments. There were delirious fancies such as the madman fashions. There were much of the beautiful, much of the wanton, much of the bizarre, something of the terrible, and not a little of that which might have excited disgust. To and fro in the 7 chambers there stalked, in fact, a multitude of dreams. And these, the dreams, writhed in and about, taking hue from the rooms, and causing the wild music of the orchestra to seem as the echo of their steps. And anon there strikes the ebony clock which stands in the hall of the velvet, and then for a moment all is still, and all is silent save the voice of the clock. The dreams are stiff, frozen as they stand, but the echoes of the chime die away. They have endured but an instant. and a light, half-subdued laughter floats after them as they depart. And now again the music swells, and the dreams live and writhe to and fro more merrily than ever, taking hue from the many-tinted windows through which stream the rays from the tripods. But to the chamber which lies most westerly of the seven there are now none of the maskers who venture, for the night is waning away, and there flows a ruddier light through the blood-colored panes, and the blackness of the sable drapery appalls. And to him whose foot falls upon the sable carpet there comes from the near clock of ebony a muffled peal more solemnly emphatic than any which reaches their ears who indulge in the more remote gaieties of the other apartments. But these other apartments were densely crowded, and in them beat feverishly the heart of life, and the revel went whirlingly on until at length there commenced the sounding of midnight upon the clock. And then the music ceased, as I have told, and the evolutions of the waltzers were quieted, and there was an uneasy cessation of all things as before. But now there were 12 strokes to be sounded by the bell of the clock, and thus it happened, perhaps, that more of thought crept with more of time into the meditations of the thoughtful among those who revelled. And thus too it happened, perhaps, that before the last echoes of the last chime had utterly sunk into silence, there were many individuals in the crowd who had found leisure to become aware of the presence of a masked figure which had arrested the attention of no single individual before. And the rumor of this new presence having spread itself whisperingly around, there arose at length from the whole company a buzz or a murmur expressive of disapprobation and surprise, then finally of terror, of horror, and of disgust. In an assembly of phantasms such as I have painted, it may well be supposed that no ordinary appearance could have excited such sensation. In truth, the masquerade license of the night was nearly unlimited, but the figure in question had out-Heroded Herod, and gone beyond the bounds of even the prince's indefinite decorum. There are chords in the heart of the most reckless which cannot be touched without emotion. Even with the utterly lost, to whom life and death are equally jests, there are matters of which no jest can be made. The whole company, indeed, seemed now deeply to feel that in the costume and bearing of the stranger neither wit nor propriety existed. The figure was tall and gaunt, and shrouded from head to foot in the habiliments of the grave. The mask which concealed the visage was made so nearly to resemble the countenance of a stiffened corpse that the closest scrutiny must have had difficulty in detecting the cheat, and yet all this might have been endured if not approved by the mad revellers around. But the mummer had gone so far as to assume the type of the Red Death. His vesture was dabbled in blood, and his broad brow, with all the features of the face, was sprinkled with the scarlet horror. When the eyes of Prince Prospero fell upon the spectral image, which with a slow and solemn movement, as if more fully to sustain its role, stalked to and fro among the waltzers, he was seen to be convulsed, in the first moment, with a strong shudder either of terror or distaste, but in the next his brow reddened with rage. "Who dares," he demanded hoarsely of the courtiers who stood near him, "who dares insult us with this blasphemous mockery? Seize him and unmask him, that we may know whom we have to hang at sunrise from the battlements." It was in the eastern or blue chamber in which stood the Prince Prospero as he uttered these words. They rang throughout the 7 rooms loudly and clearly, for the prince was a bold and robust man, and the music had become hushed at the waving of his hand. It was in the blue room where stood the prince, with a group of pale courtiers by his side. At first, as he spoke, there was a slight rushing movement of this group in the direction of the intruder, who at the moment was also near at hand, and now, with deliberate and stately step, made closer approach to the speaker. But from a certain nameless awe with which the mad assumptions of the mummer had inspired the whole party, there were found none who put forth hand to seize him, so that unimpeded he passed within a yard of the prince's person, and while the vast assembly, as if with one impulse, shrank from the centers of the rooms to the walls, he made his way uninterruptedly, but with the same solemn and measured step, which had distinguished him from the first, through the blue chamber to the purple, through the purple to the green, through the green to the orange, through this again to the white, and even thence to the violet, ere a decided movement had been made to arrest him. It was then, however, that the Prince Prospero, maddening with rage and the shame of his own momentary cowardice, rushed hurriedly through the 6 chambers, while none followed him on account of a deadly terror that had seized upon all. He bore aloft a drawn dagger, and had approached, in rapid impetuosity, to within 3 or 4 feet of the retreating figure, when the latter, having attained the extremity of the velvet apartment, turned suddenly and confronted his pursuer. There was a sharp cry, and the dagger dropped gleaming upon the sable carpet, upon which instantly afterward fell prostrate in death the Prince Prospero. Then, summoning the wild courage of despair, a throng of the revelers at once threw themselves into the black apartment, and seizing the mummer, whose tall figure stood erect and motionless within the shadow of the ebony clock, gasped in unutterable horror at finding the grave cerements and corpse-like mask which they handled with so violent a rudeness, untenanted by any tangible form. And now was acknowledged the presence of the Red Death. He had come like a thief in the night, and one by one dropped the revelers in the blood-bedewed halls of their revel, and died each in the despairing posture of his fall, and the life of the ebony clock went out with that of the last of the gay, and the flames of the tripods expired, and darkness and decay and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all.
Oh my goodness.
Yay.
Yay! Oh! Well, that, I'm kind of speechless. Let's see. Darth, spooky stories, especially with blood and stuff, enhance my Sith powers. Also, good God, that was a long one. It is a long story. Oh, hello there, Harper. Welcome! That was ecstasy. Excellent.
Was that too long?
No, it was fine. It was fine. Like I said, you know, there's no... As much as I said there is a length cut off, there really isn't tonight. So it's fine to do a longer story. I suppose my story is not as dramatic as that one. But would anyone like to hear a story? My two friends.
Of course.
All right. An old farmhouse belonging to a man named Herman DeLuise once stood near Gallipoli, Ohio. Though he paid scant attention to his fields or livestock, and the house was little better than a ruin, the old man never lacked for anything. He kept to himself and discouraged his neighbors from visiting. Many people suspected that De Luise had been a pirate. He called his place the Isle of Pines, after a notorious gathering place for buccaneers in the West Indies. On those rare occasions when the Reverend Henry Galbraith and his son William visited, the only 2 callers De Luise would tolerate, the man made no attempt to conceal the strange objects from distant lands and curious weapons that filled his house. As William grew older, he asked more and more questions about the old man's source of wealth. The boy was sure that De Luise had pirate treasure hidden in the house. Though the old man never appeared to have much money at one time, he always had enough to meet his needs, and he always paid for things with old Spanish gold pieces. This convinced the people of Gallipoli, and young William in particular, that he, De Luise, was a former pirate. Some even suggested that he had moved so far away from the ocean because there was a price on his head. But all William's efforts to get the old man to reveal the source of his gold failed. De Luise remained tight-lipped, never providing any clue as to the whereabouts of his treasure. if indeed it existed. When it came time for Deloise to die, he passed away alone and was buried quietly in the nearby cemetery. Isle of Pines was locked up, while inquiries were made to determine if there were any relatives to claim the estate. Now, it chanced that while this was going on, the Reverend Galbraith was away on a month-long visit to Cincinnati. He did not know that Herman Deloise had died. One night, he returned home in the middle of a terrible storm. The snow was so deep and the road so blocked with drifts and fallen branches that he looked around for shelter. To his relief, he saw a light. He followed it through the driving snow and recognized the Isle of Pines. As he neared the place, he noted the light was moving about the house, brightening one darkened room after another. Whatever could old Deloise be up to? He wondered as he knocked. When no one came to the door, he rapped again, even more loudly. But still he was ignored. As the light moved from chamber to chamber. Finally, afraid of freezing to death, the Reverend put his shoulder to the door and forced it open. "Hello? Herman?" he called. I apologize for my rude entry." But when the old man at last appeared, carrying a candle, he paid no attention to the clergyman. Instead, he wandered about like a sleepwalker, muttering to himself, searching for something. His visitor tried to strike up a conversation, but Herman persisted in running his hands over each wall, then dropping to his knees and searching the floor. "What have you lost?" asked the concerned Reverend Galbraith. Can I help you search?" Still, the old man would not look at him. Rather, he carried his candle to a room at the end of the passageway. In the chilly darkness, the Reverend could hear him muttering over and over again. The sound made the Reverend as uncomfortable as the cold. To ease his mind and body, he set about building a fire in the fireplace. Then, spreading his coat before it, he lay down, intending but a few moments' rest. Instead, he fell into a deep sleep that lasted the better part of the night. The first light of dawn was just visible through the thinning snow when Reverend Galbraith was roused by Deloise's triumphant cry, "'Tis here! 'Tis found!" Pulling his coat around him, the clergyman hurried down the hall to the little room at its end. He was sure that was where the cry had come from. But when he entered the room, he found no trace of Herman Deloise. Against the northern wall was an unlit candle stub in the curious holder that the old man had carried during his midnight search. In the dust that coated the wall, he could just make out the impression of two hands, as though someone, old Deloise surely, had pressed his palms against the surface. More puzzled than ever, Reverend Galbraith called out his friend's name, but though he searched from cellar to attic, he could find no trace of the man. The doors and windows were all shut tight, nor, as he peered through the early morning dimness, could he see any footsteps in the new-fallen snow. Daunted by this mystery, Reverend Galbraith took his horse from its shelter in the tumble-down barn and continued the rest of the way home, the storm having fully abated. He was welcomed by his wife and son and a good friend, a lawyer named Marin, who had come by on some bit of business that morning. But when he told his story, his wife and son merely glanced at each other, while the lawyer remarked, "Didn't you know that Deloise was dead and buried?" The clergyman, speechless, merely shook his head. "You must have been dreaming," said his son. But William's eyes shone with a curious light. Reverend Galbraith insisted. "I tell you, it happened just as I said." "If you like," said the lawyer good-naturedly, "we will go there tonight, investigate. Perhaps the ghost will appear again after dark." "Play the fool if you want," exclaimed William, adding, "I have business on the other side of town. I won't be back until supper." By 9 o'clock, when the lawyer came by to accompany Reverend Galbraith to Isle of Pines, William had not returned. "I'm relieved he isn't here," the clergyman confessed to Marin. "He seems to have no patience with talks of ghosts." Together they rode out to the farm. Just as the clergyman had reported, the two men saw a light appearing first at one window, then the next. But when they drew near, the place went suddenly dark. The front door stood open. "I know that I locked it securely when I left," said Reverend Galbraith. Inside all was darkness and silence. The men had brought candles, which they now lighted. In the thick dust on the floor, they saw the marks of the clergyman's stay and his footprints. A second set of footprints led purposely from the front door down the hall to the little room at its end. The door, which had been opened that morning, was now shut. Flickering candlelight shone beneath it. "Somebody else has been here since you left," said the lawyer, "and I believe he is still here." Suddenly, from behind the door came a scream, then the sound of a heavy body hitting the floor. Then silence. Trembling, the two men hurried down the passage. Inside the little room, they found the northern wall broken open. From the hollow safe behind it, several pouches had spilled their golden contents. While just below, William Galbraith lay sprawled on the floor, covered with antique Spanish coins. With a cry, his father stooped to pick him up, then staggered back in horror. For the young man was cold and dead. A post-mortem examination revealed no cause of death, and a jury issued a verdict of death due to a visitation of God. But Reverend Galbraith remained convinced to the end of his days that his son had been frightened to death by something quite ungodly in that accursed farmhouse.
Well read.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I believe that story is from Ohio, as you can probably tell. Oh my goodness gracious.
It's a good place for pirates to hide out afterwards.
Darth, why was the snowman shopping for carrots? Don't help him, Kintran! Why was the snowman shopping for carrots? Oh.
The
Oh.
true spooks of tonight, the comedy.
Dorothy was picking his nose. Oh. Well, Kintran, can you provide a little distraction from this, please?
I might be able to find something.
Please do.
It was one evening in summer, the year 1755, that Campbell of Enderley was on the Cushion hillside. He started by seeing a man coming towards him at full speed. A man ragged and bleeding and evidently suffering the agonies of terror. The avengers of blood are on my track. Oh, save me! The poor wretch managed to grasp out. Enervay, filled with pity for the miserable man, swore by the word of an Envy, which never failed a friend or foe yet, save him. Enverway then led the stranger to the secret cave on the Prussian side hill. No one knew of this cave but the Laird of Enverway himself, as the secret was most carefully kept and had been handed down from father to son for many generations. The entrance was small, and no one passing for an instant would suspect it to be other than a Todd's hole. But within were fair-sized rooms, one containing a well of the purest spring water. It is said that Wallace and Bruce had made use of this cave in the earlier days. And Envoy left his guest. The man was overcome by terror that he clung to Envoy's plaid, imploring him not to leave him alone. Envoy was filled with disgust at this cowardly conduct and already almost repented having plighted his word to save such a worthless creature. On Envoy's return home, he found a man in a great state of excitement waiting to see him. This man informed him of the murder of Envoy's foster brother by one of the MacNiven. "We have," he said, "tracked the murderer to within a few short distance of this wild, and while I'm here to warn you in case he should seek your protection." Envoy turned pale and remained silent, not knowing what answer to give. This man, knowing the love that subsisted between foster brothers, thought this silence arose from grief alone, and left the house to pursue the search for MacNiven further. The compassion Envoy felt for the trembling man he had left in the cave turned to hate when he thought of his beloved foster brother murdered. But as he had plighted his word to save him he must and would. As soon, therefore, as night fell, he went to the cave with food, and promised to return with more the next day. Thoroughly worn out, as soon as he reached home he retired to rest, but sleep he could not. So taking up a book, he began to read. A shadow fell across the page, and he looked up and saw his foster brother standing by his bedside. Oh, how he had changed. His fair hair clotted with blood, his face drawn and pale, his garments all gory. He uttered the following words: "Envoy, fear not the murderer. Blood must flow for blood." And then he faded away out of sight. In spite of the spirit's commands, Envoy remained true to his promise and returned next day to MacNiven with fresh provisions. That night his foster brother again appeared to him, uttering the same warning: "Envoy, Envoy, shield not the murderer. Blood must flow for blood." At daybreak, Envoy hurried off to the cave and said to MacNiven, I can no longer shield you. You must escape as best you can. Envoy now hoped he could receive no further visits from the vengeful spirits. In this, he was disappointed. For at the usual hour the ghost appeared, and in anger said, I have warned you once, I have warned you twice. It is now too late. We shall meet again in Ticonderoga. Enverway rose before dawn and went straight to the cave. McNiven was gone. Enverway saw no more of the ghost, but the adventure left him in a gloomy, melancholy state. Many a time he would wander from Crucian Hills, brooding over his vision, and people passing him would see the faraway look in his eyes, and would say to one another, The poor Lord, he is aye thinking on him that is gone. Only mysterious friends knew the cause of his melancholy. In 1756, the war between the English and French in America broke out. The 42nd Regiment embarked and landed at New York in June of that year. Campbell of Enverway was a major in the regiment. The lieutenant colonel was Francis Grant. From New York, the 42nd proceeded to Albany, where the regiment remained inactive till the spring of 1757. One evening, when the 42nd were still quartered at this place, Envoy asked the colonel if he had heard of a place called Ticonderoga. Colonel Grant replied that he had never heard the name before. Envoy then told a story. Most of the officers were present at the time. Some were impressed, others were inclined to look upon the whole thing as a joke. But seeing how very much disturbed Envoy was about all of it, even the most unbelieving refrained from banter. In 1758, an expedition was to be directed against Ticonderoga on Lake George, a fort erected by the French. The Highlanders were to form part of this expedition. The force was under Major General Abercrombie. Ticonderoga was called by the French St. Louis, really Fort Carleton, and Enverway knew it by no other name. One of the officers told Colonel Grant that the Indian name of the place was Ticonderoga. Grant, remembering Campbell's story, said, For God's sake, don't let Campbell know this, or harm will come of it. The troops embarked on Lake George and landed, without opposition, near the extremity of the lake early in July. They marched from there through the woods upon Ticonderoga, having one successful skirmish with the enemy, and driving them back with considerable loss. Lord Howe was killed in this engagement. On the 10th of July, the assault was directed to be commenced against the pickets. The Grenadiers were to follow, supported by the battalions and reserves. The Highlanders and the 55 Regiment formed the reserve. In vain the troops attempted to force their way through the abatis, they themselves being exposed to a heavy artillery and musket fire from an enemy well under cover. The Highlanders could no longer be restrained and rushed forward from the reserve, cutting and carving their way through trees and their obstacles with their claymores. The deadly fire still continued from the fort. As no ladders had been provided for scaling the breastwork, the soldiers climbed on one another's shoulders and made holes with their feet in the face of the work with their swords and bayonets. But as soon as a man reached the top, he was thrown down. Captain John Campbell and a few men succeeded to the last forcing their way through the breastwork, but were immediately cut down. After a long and desperate struggle, lasting in fact nearly 4 hours, General Abercrombie gave orders for a retreat. The troops could hardly be prevailed upon to retire, and it was not till the order had been given for the 3rd time that the Highlanders withdrew from their hopeless encounter. The loss sustained by the regiment was as follows: 8 officers, 9 sergeants, 297 men killed, 17 officers, 10 sergeants, and 306 men wounded. Enverway, after having fought the greatest courage, received at length his deathbed wound. Colonel Brand hastened to the dying man's side, who looked reproachful at him and said, "You deceived me. This is Ticonderoga, for I have seen him." Envoy never spoke again. Envoy's son, an officer in the same regiment, also lost his life at Ticonderoga. On the very day that these events were happening in faraway America, two ladies, Miss Campbell of Uttering and her sister, were walking from Killamalew to Embere, and had reached them the new bridge over the Array. One of them happened to look at the sky. She gave a call to her sister to look also. They both of them saw in the sky what looked like a siege going. They saw the different regiments with their colors and recognized many of their friends among the Highlanders. They saw Envoy and his son fall, and other men whom they knew. When they reached Envoy, they told all their friends of the vision they had just seen. They also took down the names of those they had seen fall, and the time and date of the occurrence. The well-known Danish physician, Sir William Hart, was together with the Englishman and servant walking to the castle of Envoy. These men saw the same phenomena and confirmed the statements made by the two ladies. Weeks after the Gazette corroborated their statements in its account of attempts made on Ticonderoga, every detail was correct in the vision, down to the actual number of killed and wounded. But there was sorrow throughout Arthur long before the Gazette appeared.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
You would think that if you are visited by a blood-soaked ghost, that you would listen to said ghost.
That would make more sense.
Yes, that would make more sense. I mean, honor be damned.
Especially if it's your foster brother. I mean,
Ex-
come on.
Exactly. I mean, if I woke up and suddenly found Horace floating over, well, Horace floats over me anyway. So if I woke up,
Hopefully not while you're asleep.
no, well, yeah, it depends. It depends, you know. But if that had happened, yeah,
Well, I mean, the senses can be tripped up by even the slightest thing, you know. A crumb of cheese, a bit of mustard, you know. It's not like there may be just more goulash than ghoul about him.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, but still, oh my goodness, that was a great story, Kintran. Oh my goodness, always love a good
Very
spooky,
well read.
spooky story mixed with a bit of history in it.
Oh, yeah, gotta have history.
Oh yeah.
And when they're true ghost stories, history helps.
Oh yes, indeed. Yes indeed. Darth, also Matsu, my Facebook blessed me with many jokes for you. Oh my goodness, no! Oh, that's no, no.
Spooky stories, Matsu can handle.
Yes,
Jokes.
Puns,
no.
terrifying.
They're abominations of language. Ugh. Wastes. I think it's your turn now.
I believe so. I think
Yes.
I'll read this one a little bit slower. I went a bit fast the last time just because I was worried about going over time.
No, you don't have to worry.
But this one I like doing the character, so
Yes.
I think you'll enjoy it.
Okay.
Oh, also, real quick, is my mic sounding okay?
Oh, your mic
Because I
sounds-
realized,
Yeah, it sounds fine.
okay, because I was actually previously on my webcam mic, apparently.
I had to turn Kintron up a little bit earlier, but you're fine.
Okay, good. I was wondering if I was coming through all right. Anyway. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could. But when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You who so well know the nature of my soul will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato, although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared. He prided himself on his connoisseurship in wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity, to practice imposture upon the British and Austrian millionaires. In painting and gemmery, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack. But in the matter of old wines, he was sincere. In this respect, I did not differ from him materially. I was skillful in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk one evening during the supreme madness of the carnival season that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. He had on a tight-fitting party-striped dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How?" said he. "Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible, and in the middle of the carnival." "I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain." "Amontillado?" "I have my doubts." "Amontillado?" "And I must satisfy them." "Amontillado?" "As you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucrezi. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me—" "Lucrezi cannot tell Amontillado from sherry." "And yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match for your own." "Come, let's go." "Whither?" "To your vaults." "My friend, no, I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement. Lucrezi—" "I have no engagement. Come." "My friend, no, it is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with nitre." "Let us go, nevertheless. The cold is merely nothing." "Amontillado, you have been imposed upon. And as for Lucrezi, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado." Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm. Putting on a mask of black silk and drawing a roquelaire closely about my person, I suffered him to hurry me to my palazzo. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry in honor of the time. I had told them that I should not return until the morning, and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, one and all, as soon as my back was turned. I took from their sconces 2 flambeaux, and giving one to Fortunato, bowed him through several suites of rooms to the archway that led into the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came at length to the foot of the descent and stood together on the damp ground of the catacombs of the Montressors. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. "The pipe," he said. "It is farther on," said I, "but observe the white webwork which gleams from these cavern walls." He turned towards me and looked into my eyes with 2 filmy orbs that distilled the rheum of intoxication. "Nitre?" he asked at length. "Nitre," I replied. "How long have you had that cough?" My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. "It is nothing," he said at last. "Come," I said with decision, "we will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, and admired, beloved. You are happy, as once I was. You are a man to be missed. For me it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is the Cressy." "Enough," he said. "The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough." "True, true," I replied. "And indeed I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily, but you should use all proper caution. A draught of this medoc will defend us from the damps." Here I knocked off the neck of a bottle which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mold. "Drink," I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly, while his bells jingled. "I drink," he said, "to the buried that repose around us." "And I to your long life." He again took my arm, and we proceeded. "These vaults," he said, "are extensive." "The Montressors," I replied, "were a great and numerous family." "I forget your arms." "A huge human foot d'or in a field of azure. The foot crushes a serpent rampant whose fangs are embedded in the heel." "And the motto?" "Nemo me impune lacessit." "Good," he said. The wine sparkled in his eyes and the bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the medoc. We had passed through walls of piled bones, with casks and puncheons intermingling, into the inmost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato by an arm above the elbow. "The nitre," I said. "See, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the river's bed. The drops of moisture trickle among the bones. Come, we will go back ere it is too late. Your cough—" "It is nothing," he said. "Let us go on. But first another draught of the medoc." I broke and reached him a flagon of the grave. He emptied it at a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upwards with a gesticulation I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. "You do not comprehend," he said. "Not I," I replied. "Then you are not of the Brotherhood." "How?" "You are not of the Masons." Yes, I said. Yes. "You? Impossible. A Mason?" "A Mason," I replied. "A sign," he said. "It is this," I answered, producing a trowel from beneath the folds of my roquelaire. "You jest," he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. "But let us proceed to the Amontillado." "Be it so," I said, replacing the tool beneath the cloak, and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, and descending again, arrived at a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeau rather to glow than flame. At the most remote end of the crypt there appeared another less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vault overhead, in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the 4th, the bones had been thrown down, and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall thus exposed by the displacing of the bones, we perceived a still interior recess, in depth about 4 feet, in width 3, in height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no especial use within itself, but formed merely the interval between 2 of the colossal supports of the roof of the catacombs, and was backed by one of their circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depths of the recess. Its termination the feeble light did not enable us to see. "Proceed," I said. "Herein is the Amontillado. As for Lucrezi—" "He is an ignoramus," interrupted my friend, as he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more, and I had fettered him to the granite. In its surface were 2 iron staples, distant from each other about 2 feet, horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, from the other a padlock. Throwing the links about his waist, it was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astonished to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. "Pass your hand," I said, "over the wall. You cannot help feeling the nitre. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return." "No? Then I must positively leave you. But I must first render you all the little attentions in my power." "The Amontillado!" ejaculated my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. "True," I replied, "the Amontillado." As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones of which I have before spoken. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials, and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of my masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in a great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a low moaning cry from the depth of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long and obstinate silence. I laid the second tier, and the third, and the fourth, and then I heard the furious vibrations of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might hearken to it with the more satisfaction, I ceased my labors and sat down upon the bones. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel, and finished without interruption the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th tier. The wall was now nearly up a level with my breast. I again paused, and holding the flambeau over the mason-work, threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. A succession of loud and shrill screams, bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained form, seemed to thrust me violently back. For a brief moment I hesitated. I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope with it about the recess. But the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed. I aided. I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamorer grew still. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, the ninth, and the 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th. There remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position. But now there came from out the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, "A very good joke indeed. An excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo. Over our wine." "The Amontillado," I said. "Yes, the Amontillado. But is it not getting late? Will not they be awaiting us at the palazzo? The Lady Fortunato and the rest? Let us be gone." "Yes," I said. "Let us be gone." "For the love of God, Montresor!" "Yes," I said. "For the love of God." But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, "Fortunato." No answer. I called again, "Fortunato." No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in return only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick, on account of the dampness of the catacombs. I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into its position, and I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For the half of a century, no mortal has disturbed them. In pace requiescat.
I love that story.
Oh, so do I.
Oh, it's a wonderful story.
And I haven't had any of that wine in a very long time.
I've never had a Montiliado.
Amontillado.
I've never had a Montillado.
It's a very dry sherry. There's not much sweetness to it.
I'm not much of a fan of dry wines.
I was like, normally I like, more of the resin type, but just Amontillado. It's got its taste to it.
Yeah. Have you ever heard Vincent Price do that story, Wastes?
Actually, yes.
It is
It's a
amazing, isn't
great
it?
listen.
Yes.
I'm such a fan of it.
Oh, yes. Darth, what do you call a bearded man that also makes faces? Oh no, what do you call it? What do you call it, Darth?
Harry Potter. Typo, but still not bad.
Oh. Oh dear, dear, dear. I suppose I should start reading, shouldn't I?
You are next.
It's a few pages long. It's about 6 pages. Is that okay with both of you?
Perfectly fine.
Okay. Excuse me. Sylvia Selton ate her breakfast in the morning room at Yesney with a pleasant sense of ultimate victory, such as a fervent Ironside might have permitted himself on the morrow of Worcestershire fight. She was scarcely pugnacious by temperament, but belonged to that more successful class of fighters who are pugnacious by circumstance. Fate had willed that her life should be occupied with a series of small struggles, usually with the odds slightly against her, and usually she had just managed to come through winning. And now, she felt that she had brought her hardest and certainly her most important struggle to a successful issue. To have married Mortimer Selton, dead Mortimer as his more intimate enemies called him, in the teeth of the cold hostility of his family, and in spite of his unaffected indifference to women, was indeed an achievement that had needed some determination and adroitness to carry through. Yesterday she had brought her victory to its concluding stage by wrenching her husband away from town and its group of satellite watering places, and settling him down in the vocabulary of her kind, in this remote wood-girt manor farm which was his country house. "You will never get Mortimer to go," his mother had said carpingly, "but if he once goes, he'll stay. Yesney throws almost as much a spell over him as town does. One can understand what holds him to town, but Yesney—" And the dowager had shrugged her shoulders. There was a somber, almost savage wildness about Yeseny that was certainly not likely to appeal to town-bred tastes, and Sylvia, notwithstanding her name, was accustomed to nothing much more Sylvian than leafy Kensington. She looked on the country as something excellent and wholesome in its way, which was apt to become troublesome if you encouraged it overmuch. Distrust of town life had been a new thing with her, born of her marriage with Mortimer, and she had watched with satisfaction the gradual fading of what she called the Jermyn Street look in his eyes as the woods and heather of Yeseny had closed in on them yesternight. Her willpower and strategy had prevailed. Mortimer would stay. Outside the morning room windows was a triangular slope of turf, which the indulgent might call a lawn, and beyond its low hedge of neglected fuchsia bushes, a steeper slope of heather and bracken dropped down into cavernous combes overgrown with oak and yew. In its wild, open savagery there seemed a stealthy linking of the joy of life with the terror of unseen things. Sylvia smiled complacency as she gazed with a School of Art appreciation at the landscape, and then of a sudden she almost shuddered. "It is very wild," she said to Mortimer, who had joined her. "One could almost think that in such a place the worship of Pan had never quite died out." "The worship of Pan never has died out," said Mortimer. "Other newer gods have drawn aside his votaries from time to time, but he is the nature god, to whom all must come back at last. He has been called the father of all the gods, but most of his children have been stillborn." Sylvia was religious in an honest, vaguely devotional kind of way, and did not like to hear her beliefs spoken of as mere aftergrowths. But it was at least something new and hopeful to hear dead Mortimer speak with such energy and conviction on any subject. "You don't really believe in Pan?" she asked incredulously. "I've been a fool in most things," said Mortimer quietly, "but I'm not such a fool as to not believe in Pan when I'm down here. And if you're wise, you won't disbelieve in him too boastfully while you're in his country." It was not till a week later, when Sylvia had exhausted the attractions of the woodland walks around Yeseny, that she ventured on a tour of inspection of the farm buildings. A farmyard suggested in her mind a scene of cheerful bustle, with churns and flails and smiling dairymaids, and teams of horses drinking knee-deep in duck-crowded ponds. As she wandered among the gaunt grey buildings of Yeseny Manor Farm, her first impression was one of crushing stillness and desolation. as though she had happened on some lone deserted homestead long given over to owls and cobwebs. Then came a sense of furtive, watchful hostility. The same shadow of unseen things that seemed to lurk in the wooded combes and coppices. From behind heavy doors and shuttered windows came the restless stamp of hoof or rasp of chain halter, and at times a muffled bellow from some stalled beast. From a distant corner, a shaggy dog watched her with intent, unfriendly eyes. As she drew near, it slipped quietly into its kennel, and slipped out again as noiselessly when she had passed by. A few hens, questing for food under a rick, stole away under a gate at her approach. Sylvia felt that if she had come across any human beings in this wilderness of barn and brae, they would have fled wrath-like from her gaze. At last, turning a corner quickly, she came upon a living thing that did not fly from her. Astretch in a pool of mud was an enormous sow, gigantic, beyond the town woman's wildest computation of swine flesh, and speedy alert to resent, and if necessary repel, the unwanted intrusion. It was Sylvia's turn to make an unobtrusive retreat. As she threaded her way past rickyards and cowsheds and lawn blank walls, she started suddenly at a strange sound. The echo of a boy's laughter, golden and equivocal. Jan, the only boy employed on the farm, a tow-headed, wizen-faced yokel, was visibly at work on a potato clearing halfway up the nearest hillside. And Mortimer, when questioned, knew of no other probable or possible begetter of the hidden mockery that had ambushed Sylvia's retreat. The memory of that untraceable echo was added to her other impressions of furtive, sinister something that had around Yesseni. Of Mortimer she saw very little. Farm and woods and trout streams seemed to swallow him up from dawn till dusk. Once, following the direction she had seen him take in the morning, she came to an open space in a nut copse, further shut in by huge yew trees, in the center of which stood a stone pedestal, surmounted by a small bronze figure of a youthful Pan. It was a beautiful piece of workmanship, but her attention was chiefly held by the fact that a newly cut bunch of grapes had been placed as an offering at its feet. Grapes were none too plentiful at the manor house, and Sylvia snatched the bunch angrily from the pedestal. Contemptuous annoyance dominated her thoughts as she strode slowly homeward, and then gave way to a sharp feeling of something that was very near fright. Across a thick tangle of undergrowth, a boy's face was scowling at her, brown and beautiful, with unutterably evil eyes. It was a lonely pathway. All pathways around Yesseni were lonely for the matter of that, and she sped forward without waiting to give a closer scrutiny to this sudden apparition. It was not till she had reached the house that she discovered that she had dropped the bunch of grapes in her flight. "I saw a youth in the wood today," she told Mortimer that evening. "A brown-faced and rather handsome, but a scoundrel to look at. A gypsy lad, I suppose." "A reasonable theory," said Mortimer. "Only there aren't any gypsies in these parts at present." "Then who was he?" asked Sylvia. and as Mortimer appeared to have no theory of his own, she passed on to recount her finding of the votive offering. I suppose it was your doing, she observed. It's a harmless piece of lunacy, but people would think you dreadfully silly if they knew of it. Did you meddle with it in any way? Asked Mortimer. I threw the grapes away. It seems so silly, said Sylvia, watching Mortimer's impassive face for a sign of annoyance. I don't think you are wise to do that, he said reflectively. I've heard it said that the wood gods are rather horrible to those who molest them. Horrible perhaps to those that believe in them, but you see I don't, retorted Sylvia. All the same, said Mortimer in his even, dispassionate tone, I should avoid the woods and orchids, if I were you, and give a wide berth to the horned beasts on the farms. It was all nonsense, of course, but in that lonely wood-girt spot nonsense seemed able to rear a bastard brood of uneasiness. Mortimer, said Sylvia suddenly, I think we will go back to town sometime soon. Her victory had not been so complete as she had supposed. It had carried her onto ground that she was already anxious to quit. I don't think you will ever go back to town, said Mortimer. He seemed to be paraphrasing his mother's prediction as to himself. Sylvia noted with dissatisfaction and some self-contempt that the course of her next afternoon's ramble took her instinctively clear of the network of woods. As to the horned cattle, Mortimer's warning was scarcely needed, for she had always regarded them as of doubtful neutrality at the best. Her imagination unsexed the most matronly dairy cows and turned them into bulls liable to see red at any moment. The ram who fed in the narrow padlock below the orchids she had adjudged, after ample and cautious probation, to be of docile temper. Today, however, she decided to leave his docility untested, for the usually tranquil beast was roaming with every sign of restlessness from corner to corner of his meadow. A low, fitful piping, as if some reedy flute was coming from the depth of a neighboring copse. And there seemed to be some subtle connection between the animal's restless pacing and the wild music from the wood. Sylvia turned her steps in an upward direction and climbed the heather-clad slopes that stretched in rolling shoulders high above Yessany. She had left the piping notes behind her, but across the wooded combs at her feet the wind brought her another kind of music. The straining bay of hounds in full chase. Yessany was just on the outskirts of the Devon and Somerset country, and the hunted deer sometimes came that way. Sylvia could precisely see a dark body, breasting hill after hill and sinking again and again out of sight as he crossed the combs, while behind him steadily swelled that relentless chorus, and she grew tense with the excited sympathy that one feels for any hunted thing in whose capture one is not directly interested. And at last he broke through the outermost line of oak scrub and fern and stood panting in the open. A fat September stag, carrying a well-furnished head. His obvious course was to drop down to the brown pools of undercomb, and thence make his way toward the red deer's favored sanctuary, the sea. To Sylvia's surprise, however, he turned his head to the upland slope and came lumbering resolutely onward over the heather. It would be dreadful, she thought. The hounds will pull him down under my very eyes. But the music of the pack seemed to have died away for a moment. And in its place, she heard again that wild piping, which rose now on this side, now on that, as though urging the failing stag to a final effort. Sylvia stood well aside from his path, half hidden in a thick growth of whortle bushes, and watched him swing stiffly upward, his flanks dark with sweat, the coarse hair on his neck showing light by contrast. The pipe music shrilled suddenly around her, seemed to come from the bushes at her very feet. And at the same moment, the great beast slewed round and bore directly down upon her. In an instant, her pity for the hunted animal was changed to wild terror at her old danger. The thick heather roots mocked her scrambling effort at flight, and she looked frantically downward for a glimpse of oncoming hounds. The huge antler spikes were within a few yards of her, and in a flash of numbing fear she remembered Mortimer's warning to beware of horned beasts on the farms. And then, with a quick throb of joy, she saw that she was not alone. A human figure stood, a few paces aside, knee-deep in the whortle bushes. "Drive it off!" she shrieked. But the figure made no answering movement. The antlers drove straight at her breast. The acrid smell of the hunted animal was in her nostrils. But her eyes were filled with the horror of something she saw other than her oncoming death. And in her ears rang the echo of a boy's laughter, golden and equivocal. So maybe it's best she didn't move those grapes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for the hydrate, Kintran. I need it.
It sounded like you were starting to need it.
Yeah, I was needing it. It's one of my favorite stories. Yeah, don't mess with Pan. I mean, how many people have learned that the hard way?
Not enough to tell the tale.
Oh, that's true. And then 20, I heard about this while walking in the woods. Ah, well, best learn that lesson. You know, don't mess with any gods. I mean, even if you don't believe them, don't mess with them. You never know.
That's bad. She knew it was an offering, but she thought it was funny and just took it away anyway.
Yeah. Because she was offended by it.
Her whole comment goes, "It only affects the gods that you believe in."
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Uh huh. Uh huh.
It's like, sorry, they don't really work that way.
No, not at all. Okay. Kintran, you up for another story?
I might be able to do another one.
Okay.
Try to see how long this one is. Could be interesting. Oh, yeah, that's make sure how long it is. Okay. Yeah. Okay. In October of 1893, I was staying in a town which we shall call Rappingham. One night I had some kinfolk dined with another old friend of his, Dr. Ferrer, and of course, his dinner he asks a propos de Barros. Have you ever heard of the ghost of Blake Street? A sunny, pleasant street as respectable as any and interesting antiquity in Rappingham. We had none of us heard of the ghost, and begged the doctor to enlighten our ignorance. His story ran thus. I have it in his own writing as far as the essence goes. This house, he says, belongs to my friends the Applebys, who let it, as they live elsewhere. A quiet couple took it and lived in it for 5 years. When the husband died and the widow went away, they made no complaint, well, tenants. The house stood empty for some time, and all I know personally is that the matter is that I, my wife, and the children were in the dining room one Sunday when we heard unusual noises in the drawing room overhead. We went to the rooms but could find no cause or explanation of the disturbance and thought no more of it. About 6 or 7 years ago, I let the house to Mr. Buckley, who was still the tenant. He was unmarried, and his family consisted of his mother and sisters. They preceded him to put the place in order, and before his arrival came to me in some irritation complaining that I had let them a haunted house. They insisted that there were strange noises as if heavy weights were being dragged about, or heavy footsteps pacing in the rooms on the stairs. I said that I knew nothing of the matter. The stairs are of stone, and water is only carried up to the first floor. There's an unused system of hot air pipes. Something went wrong with the water main in the area once, but the noises lasted after it was mended. I think Miss Buckley, when he arrived, had never heard anything unusual, but one evening as he walked upstairs with an ink bottle, he found his hand full of some liquid. Thinking that he had spilt the ink, he went to a window where he found out his hand was full of water, to the account for which there was no stain on the ceiling or anything else he could discover. On another occasion, one of the young ladies was kneeling by a trunk in the attic alone, when water was swished over her face as if from a wet brush. There was a small pool of water on the floor, and the wall beyond her was sprinkled. Time went on, and the disturbances were very rare. In fact, ceased for 2 years till the present week, when Mrs. Clutton, the widow, accompanied by her 2 children, came to stay at the Buckleys. She heard of the disturbances and of the theory of hauntings. I don't know if these interested her or not. On Monday, 9th of October, Mrs. Clutton came to consult me. Here's her story. About 1:15 on Sunday nights or Monday morning, she was asleep with one of her children, the other sleeping in the room. She was awakened by footsteps on the stair, and supposed that a servant was coming to call her to Miss Buckley, who was ill. The steps stopped at the door. Then the noise was repeated. Miss Clawton lit her bedroom candle and opened the door and listened. There was no one there. The clock on the landing pointed to 20 minutes past 1. Miss Clawton went back to bed and read a book and fell asleep and woke to find the candle still lit, but low in the socket. She heard a sigh and saw a lady unknown to her, her head swathed with a soft white shawl, and her gentle expression refined. Her features were emaciated. The appearance said, "Follow me," and Miss Clawton, taking her bedroom candle, rose and followed out on the landing, and so into the adjacent drawing room. She could not remember opening the door, which the housemaid had blocked outside, and she owns that the passage is dreamlike in her memory. Seeing that her candle was flickering out, she substituted it for a pink one taken from McCheffna, and the figure walked nearer to the window and turned 3/4 round, said, "Tomorrow," and was seen no more. Mrs. Clawton went back to her room, where her eldest child asked, "Who is the lady in white?" "Only me, mother. Go to sleep," she thinks as she answered. After lying awake for 2 hours with gas burning, she fell asleep. The pink candle from the drawing room chiffonier was in the candlestick in the morning. After hearing the lady's narrative, I told her to try to change her air, and she declined as cowardly. So, as she would stay in Mr. Buckley's, I suggested that an electric alarm communicating with Miss Buckley's room should be rigged up, and this was done. Here the doctor paused, and as the events had taken within a week, we felt that we were, alas, on the track of a recent ghost. Next morning, about 1, the Buckleys were aroused by a tremendous peal of the alarm. Miss Clawton had found in a faint. The next morning, she consulted me as to the whereabouts of a certain place. Let me call it Maresby. I suggested the use of the postal directory, and we found Maresby, a place extremely unknown to fame, in an agricultural district about 5 hours from London, in the opposite direction of Rappingham. To this place Miss Clawton said she must go, in the interest and by order of certain ghosts, whom she saw on Monday night, and whose injunctions she had taken down in a notebook. She has left Rappingham for London, and there, said the doctor, my story ends for present. We expected it to end for good and all, but in the course of a week came a communication to the doctor in writing from Miss Clawton's governess. This lady, on Miss Clawton's arrival at her London house Friday, 13th of October, passed the night perturbed by sounds of weeping, loud moans, and a very odd noise overhead, like some electric battery gone wrong. In fact, much of the warning of a jack running down, which old Jeffrey used to give at the Wesses' house in Epworth. There were also heavy footsteps and thuds as if moving weighty bodies, so far as it goes. This curious communication I read at Rappingham on Saturday, October 14th, or Sunday, October 15th. On Monday, I went to town, and in the course of a week I received a letter from my kinsman in Rappingham saying that Mrs. Clawton had written to Dr. Ferrier telling him that she had gone to Maresby on Saturday, had accomplished the bidding of the ghosts, and had lodged with one Joseph Wright, the parish cleric. Her duty had been to examine the Maresby parish registers and to compare certain entries with information given by the ghost in her written in her notebook. If the entries in the parish register tallied with notes, she was to pass the time between 1 o'clock and 1:30 alone in Maresby Church to receive a communication from the spectres. All of this she said she had done, and in evidence of her journey enclosed half a ticket to Maresby, which a dream had warned her would not be taken on her arrival. She also sent a white rose from the grave to Dr. Ferrier, a gentleman in no sympathy with the Jacobite cause, which indeed he has no connection whatsoever with the matter at hand. On hearing of this letter from Mrs. Cotton, I confess that, not knowing the lady, I remained purely skeptical. The railway company, however, vouched for the ticket. The rector of Maresby, being appealed to, knew nothing of the matter. He therefore sent his creature to the parish clerk. Did a lady pass a part of Sunday night in the church? The clerk and the curate admitted that his unusual event had occurred. A lady had arrived from London on Saturday evening, had lodged with Wright, the parish clerk, and had asked for the parish registers, had compared them with her notebook after morning service on Sunday, and begged to leave to part pass of the night in the church. The curate in vain tried to dissuade her, and finally, washing his hands of it, had left her to Wright and the clerk. To him she described Mr. George Howard, deceased, one of the ghosts. He recognized the description, and he accompanied her to the church on dark nights, starting at 1 o'clock. She stayed alone, without a light, in the locked-up church from 1:20 to 1:45 when he let her out. There now remained no doubt that Miss Cotton had really gone to Maresby, a long and disagreeable journey, and had been locked in the church alone at a witching hour. Beyond this point, we have only the statements of Miss Cotton made to Lord Bolt, Mr. Myers, and the others, and published with the Society of Psychical Research. She says that after arranging the alarm bell on Monday night, October 9th, 10th, she fell asleep reading in her dressing gown, lying outside her bed. She awakened and found a lady in a white shawl bending over her. Miss Cotton said, "Am I dreaming or is it true?" The figure gave, as testimony to character, a piece of information. Next, Miss Cotton saw a male ghost, tall, dark, healthy, 60 years old, who named himself as George Howard, buried in the Maresby churchyard. Maresby being a place of which Miss Cotton, like most people, now heard of for the first time. He gave the dates of his marriage and death, which are correct, and he had been seen by Mr. Myers in Miss Cotton's notebook. He bade her verify these dates at Maresby, and waited 1:15 in the morning at the grave of Richard Hart, a person like all of them unknown to Miss Cotton, at the southwest corner of the south aisle of Maresby Church. This Mr. Hart died on May 15th, 1745, and witnessed many events of interest by doing so. Mr. Howard also named and described Joseph Wright of Maresby as a man who would help her, and he gave her a minute location information. Next came the phantom of a man whose name Miss Cotton is not free to give. He seemed to be in great trouble, at first covering his face with his hands, but later removing them. These three specters were to meet Mrs. Clausen at Maresby Church and give her information of importance on matters concerning, apparently, the third and only unhappy appearance. After these promises and injunctions, the phantoms left, and Miss Cotton went to the door to look for the clock. Feeling faint, she ran the alarm. When her friends came and found her in a swoon on the floor, the hour was 1:20. What Mrs. Cotton's children were doing all this time, whether they were in the room or not, we don't know. On Thursday, Miss Cotton went to town. Her governess was perturbed, as we have seen. On Friday nights, Mrs. Cotton dreamed a number of things concerning her journey. The page of the notes made from this dream was shown to Mr. Myers. Thus, her half-ticket was not to be taken. She was to find Mr. Francis concerned in the private affair of the ghost, which needed rectifying and so forth. These premonitions, with others, were all fulfilled. Mrs. Cotton, in the church at night, continued her conversation with the ghost whose acquaintance she had made at Rappingham. She obtained, it seems, all the information needed to settle the mysterious matters which disturbed the male ghost who hid his face, and on Monday morning she visited the daughter of Mr. Howard in her country house in the park, recognized a strong likeness to her father, and carried out all the things desired by the dead to the full, as had been requested. The wishes expressed to her were perfectly rational, reasonable, and of natural importance. The clerk, Wright, attests that the accuracy of Miss Clutton's description of Mr. Howard, whom he knew, and the correspondence of her dates with the parish register and on the graves which he found for her at her request. Mr. Myers, from the very partial knowledge of what the Maresby ghost business was, thinks of reasons for not revealing the matter entirely sufficient. The ghost's messages to the survivors affected the intended results, says Miss Clutt. Getting a ghost to do some recovery work for you.
That is interesting. And the Lady in White appears in a lot of ghost stories. Seems to be a very common ghost.
Usually a burial shroud.
Yeah.
But the fact that she had multiple ghosts just come to have conversations with her to get things taken care of.
Yeah. That's gotta be kind of tiring after a time.
Yeah.
She wakes up,
There's
there's like a
a
line of...
note that mentioned the Psychical Society, which is the people who compare the paranormal versus actual psychological powers.
Huh.
And that's also the person who, well, since this was done, but since the editor of this book is also one that went through and edited the one about the fairies, and he's part of the Psychical Society that the treatise was written for.
Interesting.
It is interesting that he cross-references his own material.
Yeah, that's interesting. Darth, what do you call a duck that's on drugs? Oh my goodness gracious. What do you call a duck that's on drugs? I'm gonna regret this. Mark my words, Kintran waste, I'm gonna regret this.
It does have a pun in it.
No.
Yep.
A quack. Darth, you
boy.
drive me to drink.
So you're saying you need another hydrate?
Confound that Darth.
Confound it. Confound. Confound Darth! Confound Kintran! Confound! I need a third person. I can't think of a third person. I hate Darth! I love that cartoon.
Bugging? I don't know. Has he been bugged tonight?
Oh, wait, what? No, Darth,
I
you're
don't
not.
think so, not yet.
No, Are you thinking what I'm thinking? You're thinking. Oh no.
I think I'm thinking what you think they're thinking you're thinking.
But am I thinking what you're thinking? What they're thinking? What you're thinking? What I'm thinking? Ah!
I thought so.
Okay, let me dig it out then. Okay, that's.
Now, while you're doing that, does anyone have any objection to some pasta this evening?
No, I love pasta.
Even the creepy variety?
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, no, I have no problem. What kind do you want, Darth? Do you want mealworms or crickets?
Parmesan.
Parmesan. That's not pasta, that's cheese.
It goes on pasta.
Mealworms. Okay, that narrows it down. And what do you want? Cheddar cheese, barbecue, or Mexican spice? Which one? Cheddar cheese, barbecue, or Mexican spice?
Go spicy. Go spicy.
I actually like spicy foods. I love them.
Also,
Mexican
while you're
spice,
eating
okay.
this insect, I can give us a quick little 2-sentence horror story that I found.
Okay. Hello, Firefly Spice. Yeah. The spice is all.
The spice must flow.
If I just
Anyway.
okay, I'm gonna eat it right now.
All right, 2-sentence horror story. I can't move, breathe, speak, or hear, and it's so dark all the time. If I knew it would be this lonely, I would have been cremated instead.
Lovely. Ah. Yeah, it's kind of blah. The meal was blah tonight. But yes, Waste, you can do a creepy pasta.
I'll say I'll go a bit contemporary, take a
Okay.
break from the classics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let me know when you're done chowing on your.
I am
meats.
done chowing. It takes me like a second to chow that thing.
Alrighty. Pray, for devils have no reason. Satan waits to curse your ways. Have you seen it in his eyes in the sunset? Have you wondered if he's laughing when he plays? Kansas, the devil game. This is a set of instructions for how to speak with the devil, which, as those of you with any sort of brains at all might note, is a patently moronic proposition on the face of it, one likely to culminate in any number of thoroughly unpleasant fates. Honestly, it would probably be smarter to publish your credit card number on Facebook or take up a career in crocodile wrestling. But then, that isn't going to stop you, is it? Not if you're sincerely interested, at least. Technically, if you do everything just right, there's a fair chance you'll walk away scot-free. And that seems to be reason enough for some people to decide that it's a good idea. Especially if you're the fate-tempting, thrill-seeking, scare-junkie type. Or the desperate type. Which brings me to a point of clarification I ought to make. This is not a manual for making any kind of Faustian bargain. You know, the whole sell your soul type of deal. Although if you happen to bring it up in conversation, he certainly wouldn't be one to refuse. Following through with such a foolhardy bargain, however, would necessitate removing some of the protections which you will put in place for your conversation. And I don't think I need to spell out for you why that would be a bad idea. If you're really mathematically impaired enough to want to trade something that will last an infinite number of years for something that might last about 90 tops, there are plenty of other rituals out there for you to follow. This one, if performed correctly, should only allow the two of you to talk. This perhaps begs the question of why exactly you would want to speak with the devil in the first place. Maybe some of you just like the idea of making small talk with extremely dangerous occult entities, but for the sake of the human race, I hope most of you aren't quite that stupid. Short answer is, he knows things. Things that some of you may have a deep vested interest in finding out. I mean, he's not omniscient or anything. Much as he might like to pretend otherwise, he's not God. But he's definitely got a supernatural advantage over the kind of knowledge any human would be able to obtain. For example, he probably wouldn't be able to predict when the next world war will happen or tell you the cure for cancer, but he could very well be able to predict the winning numbers of tomorrow's $500 million Powerball drawing, or tell you what deadly undiagnosed condition might be affecting one of your loved ones. Of course, the Prince of Darkness doesn't just go around giving out winning lottery numbers to anybody who asks, and trusting any sort of information obtained from a being commonly described as, quote, the father of all lies, unquote, is liable to land you in a worse situation than you were in when you started. However, if you're really dead set on finding something out and you've exhausted all other options, there is a way to try to get accurate information out of the guy. You see, like so many of the more urbane villains in popular culture, the devil has a bit of a penchant for games and gambling. Of course, the reason he likes them so much is that he almost always wins. Unless you happen to be a fiddler named Johnny, or are being represented by Daniel Webster, you're probably going to get your ass handed to you. But if you're determined enough to want to face the risks and the long odds, there's a certain game the two of you could play to try to win the information you need. First things first, though. We'll start off with a description of the summoning process, then get into the rules of the game, some tips for how to play, and finally, of course, the inevitable litany of arcane shit that might go horribly wrong. In order to contact your conversational partner, you'll need to go to a church at midnight. It doesn't matter what kind of church, large or small, old or new, liberal or conservative, just as long as you're sure it will be empty. The last thing you want is for some preacher to walk in on you while you're in the middle of this, for the sake of the preacher's well-being as much as your own. The process would probably work best if you try it on a new moon, or a full moon, or Friday the 13th, or Halloween. The actual day is less important than the psychological effect it has on you. As long as you don't try it on Christmas Eve or something stupid like that, you should be fine. The time is important, though. You don't have to start or end your ritual at exactly 12 o'clock a.m. Greenwich Atomic Time or anything, but as a general rule of thumb, you ought to show up a bit before midnight and have everything set up by no later than 10 or 15 after. Show up a lot before midnight if you don't know how you're going to get in. Shockingly enough, most houses of God do tend to lock their doors at night, at least if no one's there to watch over them. And remember, we want empty. Got it? There are, of course, certain things you need to bring, and certain things you can't bring. For this ritual, you will need a full can of salt. You won't need to use all of it, but it's always better to have more than you need than to have less. 7 candles, red or white being preferable, something to light the candles with. You would be shocked how often people forget this. Occult ritual or not, they aren't going to magically light themselves. A length of red string, rope, yarn, or thread. A full-length floor or wall mirror. Ideally, you'll want to find one of these already present in the church. They're a bit unwieldy to be lugging around with you during a break-in. However, if there really aren't any there, you'll have to bring your own. You might also find it useful to bring some markers, pencils, paper, a flashlight, and any sort of tools that might be necessary to secure your entrance into the church. You will not be permitted to bring in any electronic or timekeeping devices. This includes all cell phones, smartphones, tablets, e-readers, MP3 players, PDAs, calculators, wristwatches, pocket watches, kitchen timers, hourglasses, etc., etc., etc. Seriously, it's worse than the SAT. If you're one of those people that has your smartphone practically wired into your brain, don't worry. You can bring those things with you to the church as long as you leave them outside the room in which you will be doing the ritual. If you brought a flashlight, helpful for finding your way around without attracting unwanted attention, leave that outside too. Also, don't bring in any sort of religious paraphernalia to protect you, especially if it pertains to the Abrahamic religions. And yes, if those gothy black cross earrings you're wearing are hanging right side up, they count. If you have any kind of holy symbols like that with you, the devil will simply refuse to show up. Don't worry, you're not going in totally unprotected. In fact, most of the supplies with you are not for any sort of devil summoning ritual, but for your own protection. Old superstitions and folk magic remedies to guard oneself from evil. From what I know of it, the effect's mostly based on the power of belief, so there are probably numerous other objects, artifacts, and procedures that would work just as well. If you'd like to risk being left helpless at the mercy of the devil in order to test that theory, feel free to experiment. However, for anyone without a psychotic death wish, I'd recommend sticking to the ritual as follows. Once you're sure you have all the right supplies with you, make your way into the church and find some place to set up. It can be anywhere, from the main sanctuary where services are held, to a Sunday school classroom, to a walk-in supply closet, as long as you have a sufficient amount of open floor space and are certain not to be disturbed. Set up your mirror first. This is where the devil will appear when you summon him. As such, you mustn't complete the summoning until you've laid down certain wards around it. First, surround the mirror with an unbroken circle of salt. If the mirror is hanging on a wall or door, lay down a semicircle around it instead, making sure that the salt touches the wall at both ends. Then, wrap your red string around the mirror several times. The color red, especially red string, is symbolic of protection in the folklore of many cultures and religions. This is also why red candles are a good idea. Speaking of the candles, set them up around the outside of your circle or semicircle of salt, spaced at relatively even intervals. No, you do not have to get out measuring tape and make it exactly perfect, but do at least try to make it look as though it was set up by someone old enough to be trusted with matches. Light the candles in a clockwise fashion, being careful not to disturb the salt. If you break the circle, you'll have to start all over again. Once all of the candles are lit and burning strongly, your protective wards are complete. You are now ready to proceed to the actual summoning. To do so, you first must get the devil's attention and demonstrate your resolve by performing some sort of sacrilegious act in the holy space. Turning a crucifix or cross upside down is fairly conventional, but it's not the only option. For example, I know of a kid who once fulfilled this requirement by scribbling obnoxious graffiti all over a painting of Jesus hanging in his Sunday school classroom. The nice thing about turning a cross upside down is that once you've finished your encounter, assuming you've survived it in one piece, you can just flip it right side up again and no one's the wiser, sidestepping the relatively minor but still irritating risk of having your Sunday school turn into a reenactment of the Spanish Inquisition for the next month and a half. After you've finished doing whatever offensive thing you decide on, shut all doors to the room and turn off all the lights, so that the space is lit only by the candles. Face the mirror and stare deeply into it, concentrating on your desired outcome. There are no incantations, no arcane strings of Latin you have to recite. Just look into the mirror and wish as hard as you can for the devil to appear there. After a few moments of this, when you feel ready, close your eyes and count to 10. Then open them. If all has gone correctly, you will no longer see your own reflection. You will be looking at the devil, or at least looking at the way the devil has chosen to appear to you. Chances are he won't look like your conventional red-horned demon with goat legs and a pitchfork, nor any other sort of terrible apparition. No point in scaring you off now. Better to lure you in, make you feel safe. To that end, he generally takes on the appearance of a fairly average, nondescript human being. If anything, he's prone to vanity and will lean towards the more attractive end of the spectrum. The only really frightening part of him will be his eyes. No matter how hard he tries, he can't hide the sinister gleam smoldering deep within them. The malevolent amusement and hunger, like the eyes of a spider contemplating a fly struggling in its web. They're supremely confident, those eyes. Confident and without pity. Don't look into them too deeply or you'll begin to feel helpless and paralyzed with dread, losing your hope and your will to fight. Since you'll probably just be standing there, staring at him in shock for a few moments, having on some level expected for the ritual to fail, he'll initiate the conversation by asking you what it is you desire from him. If you can gather your wits enough to string together a coherent sentence, you should respond with something like, "I wish to challenge you in a game of question and response." Even if you don't get the words exactly right, he'll know what you mean, and he'll accept your request with a wide, predatory grin of anticipation. He's been playing this game for a long time, you see, and he's very good at it. Most humans, on the other hand, are very bad at it. This gives him a chance to, at the very least, thoroughly mess with your mind, and at most, well, we'll save that for the litany of shit that could go wrong. You'll have to play it very smart to avoid justifying his expectations. The general rules to the game are very simple, with a few caveats that can make things more complicated. He'll begin by asking you a question. He always initiates the game. It can be anything from a piece of obscure trivia to a riddle to an extremely personal inquiry. Don't worry, you won't be immediately plunged into hell if you get the wrong answer or anything like that. As a matter of fact, he won't even tell you whether you got the answer right or wrong. After you've answered his question, you get to ask him one in return. Now, here's where the consequences of your response come in. If you answered his last question correctly, he will respond to your question as honestly and accurately as he is able. However, if you answered it incorrectly, he is free to lie to you as he sees fit. Perhaps if you've asked him something you're better off not knowing, he'll tell you the truth about it anyway. More likely, he'll feed you the most insidious, damaging lie he can come up with. Either way, after he's responded, he'll ask you another question, and the process will repeat over and over again until you decide to call it quits. Now, you may be sitting there thinking that it sounds fairly easy to get the information you need. All you have to do is wait for a question you can answer correctly, and then take that opportunity to ask him what you really want to know, ignoring everything else he's said. Well, it's not that simple. The devil will never give you an easy question, one that you can be completely sure of the answer to. He may instead give you questions that you have some vague knowledge of, that you think maybe you know the answer to, but aren't really confident, thus forcing you to endlessly second-guess yourself, obsessing over whether or not you can trust the information that he gave you next. Perhaps you'll think that what he said was a lie, wish it was a lie, but be eternally consumed by doubt, unable to fully convince yourself that you were wrong. Or perhaps you'll have to make a huge choice based on the information that he gave you, and be tormented by fear and indecisiveness as you realize that your fate, and perhaps that of others as well, rests entirely upon whether or not you were able to correctly recall some arcane piece of trivia that you don't even remember now. You'll never remember the exact questions the devil asked you, by the way. That would make it too easy for you to go back and check on your responses. Or maybe, instead of testing your knowledge, he'll ask you something personal, something you even lie to yourself about. You'll answer back to him thinking you've gotten the question correct. No, I don't resent my sister. Yes, I would turn the money into the police. But he'll know better. He'll know better than you do that you're lying. And he'll lie to you in return. And you'll believe him. You'll believe him until you are no longer able to deceive yourself. And by then, it might be too late. Or maybe he won't even give you a chance to get an accurate response at all. Maybe he'll just ask you endless strings of completely impossible questions, making you more and more frustrated and disheartened as you realize you'll never be able to force him to tell you the truth. Questions like, what was the exact height of Mount Everest in centimeters in the year 1666? Or, what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? Although, knowing his sense of humor, if he ever asked the latter, he might consider African or European a correct response. There are a couple of ways to short-circuit this particular strategy, however. Additional rules and courses of action that make the game more interesting and prevent you from being stonewalled completely. Although, in all honesty, he probably wants for you to try one of those options anyway. The first option is to ask him a riddle instead of a question. If you somehow manage to stump him and he answers the riddle wrong or gives up, he'll be obligated to give you a truthful response to your next question. If he answers the riddle correctly, once again, don't worry, he won't pounce on you like a sphinx or drag you into hell. What will happen is that he will get a pass, allowing him to lie in response to one question he would otherwise be obligated to answer truthfully. Honestly, if he gets a pass, you might as well just give up and quit the game right there. It's nearly impossible to determine when he's telling you the truth under the best of conditions. Adding another layer of complexity by constantly trying to figure out when and if he's used his pass, it's about enough to make any normal person's brain explode. There's no way, just forget it. The second option is for you to take a dare from him. If you accept it and vow to follow through, then once again, he'll have to answer your next question truthfully. If you choose instead to reject it, he'll get another pass. Now, before you freak out and reject that whole idea incompletely, you should know that he won't ask you to do anything overly dramatic or unspeakably evil like blow up a hospital or murder somebody. As a rule of thumb, most dares won't involve direct loss of life or any major felonies. However, they certainly won't be easy. Inflicting severe pain on yourself, doing something that terrifies the shit out of you, cutting off a treasured relationship, publicly humiliating yourself or someone you love. All of these things and more, things you might not even be able to imagine, are completely on the table. If you're willing to go that far to put yourself in that kind of position, you'll get your answer. However, if he manages to come up with the one thing you know you simply can't or won't do, well, then once again, you might as well just quit. One last thing, don't think you can just tell him you're going to do something and then not do it. If you accept a dare and then don't follow through with it, well, let's just say there will be consequences. Just suck it up and keep your promise no matter what it was. Trust me, you're better off that way. Finally, when you've either gotten the information you wanted or given it up on it completely, you may end the ritual by simply thanking the devil for accepting your request, bowing politely at the waist, and bidding him farewell. The surface of the mirror will seem to swim and flicker for a moment, and then you will be looking at your own reflection again. Only when you are absolutely certain that you're looking into your own two eyes again, may you turn away from the mirror, flick the lights back on, and begin dismantling your protections. Now, and this is important, even if you haven't gotten the information that you wanted, you must end the ritual in this manner before 66 minutes have elapsed. Oh, well, I suppose that technically you have 66 minutes and 6 seconds. Subtle, right? But if you're seriously going to try to cut it that close without any kind of timekeeping device, you're probably screwed anyway. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that you keep to this time limit. I'll save the reason behind that for the end, but don't skip ahead. I've still got a few important tips on how to play. 1. Be very careful what sort of personal information you give out. Try not to talk about yourself, especially your emotions and problems, any more than absolutely necessary. This guy knows human psychology like the back of his hand, and he will get inside of your head. It's like talking to Hannibal Lecter. Give him enough to work with, and even if you don't believe a single word he says, he will still find ways to fuck with your mind like nobody's business. If anything he asks makes you even remotely uncomfortable, do not hesitate to lie through your teeth. There will be plenty of other questions. 2. On a similar note, try to keep the game on track and moving briskly. Unstructured interactions of any kind are to be avoided. Chances are that at some point he will try to draw you off on a tangent, discussing something that fascinates you, analyzing a response you've given him, or finding some other excuse to speak at length without moving the game forward. This is not only a waste of valuable time, but also another excellent opportunity to mess with your mind. 3. If you choose to give him a riddle, use one you've made up yourself. If your riddle has ever been written down anywhere at all, from the pages of The Hobbit to some long-lost tome of ancient magic, he will already know the answer. That said, it still has to be a legitimate riddle, with an answer that makes logical sense from some angle. You can't just ask something like, "What's green, has 10 legs and hops," then claim for some inexplicable reason that the answer was marshmallows. Nor can you ask him a straight question like, "What have I got in my pocket?" He probably knows that anyway. There are no hard and fast rules to determine whether a riddle makes sense or not, but you're a reasonable human being. Your ancestors ate from the tree of knowledge. Please, for the love of crap, use common sense. 4. If you choose to take a dare, there is a slight chance that the devil will ask you to do something seemingly easy. Deliver a letter, for instance, or scribble a 10-digit number in a public restroom stall. If he does ask you for something like this, and you have even a shred of common decency in you, do not accept. Chances are that he's using you to further some sinister plot, one liable to ruin a lot of lives and harm a lot of people. Who knows, maybe you're the type of person who really doesn't mind throwing an unknown number of total strangers under a bus to find out what you want to know. But at least be aware that that is what you're doing. 5. Last but not least, be very aware of the time. It might be helpful to do some practicing beforehand and get a feel for how long an hour is without a watch. The devil will probably put off discussing the things you're most keen to find out for as long as he can, and as you near the 66-minute deadline, he'll start trying harder and harder to distract you, captivate you, and otherwise keep you playing until it's too late. He'll string you along, feed you little glimmers of false hope, keep you thinking, "Just a few more minutes, I'm almost there." Don't fall for it. Don't go over the time limit, no matter what. Now, you might be thinking that this game really doesn't sound all that dangerous so far. Threats of psychological damage rarely seem to carry the same weight as threats of physical damage, even though their costs are often just as great. Hate to burst your bubble, but the game is far from safe. There are plenty of ways for you to seriously screw yourself over both physically and mentally, not to mention spiritually. And it is with these that I will conclude, in the vain hope that they may make some sort of impression. First, while you are speaking with the devil, do not let him out of your sight. Keep staring into the mirror no matter what happens. He will undoubtedly try various tricks to make you look away. You will hear noises behind you, feel eyes on the back of your neck, see shadowy phantoms writhing in the depths of the mirror. A cold breath will blow upon you from behind, smelling like the crypt. A deep silence will settle, only to be interrupted by a loud smack directly behind your head, giving you about the worst jump scare you've ever had. Hell, the devil may even abandon a measure of his own dignified facade and give a sudden jump of feigned shock, shouting loudly and pointing behind you with a very convincing look of terror on his face. Whatever he might test you with, you must not look away from him. If you look away, if you lose sight of him completely, even for 1 second, you will look back at the mirror and find him gone. Well, not gone. Out of the mirror. In the room. With you. Exactly how much of your body the police will find the next morning and what state it's in will depend entirely on the sort of mood he's in. The same thing goes if you break any of the protections you laid down before beginning the ritual. Interrupting the circle of salt, letting the red string unwind, knocking over a candle, or letting one go out. Any of these things will free him from the mirror, and then... well, you're all a bunch of creative horror junkies. I'm sure you can fill in the blanks. On a different topic, you may reach a point in the game, probably after a long series of maddeningly impossible questions, where the devil asks you the deceptively simple question: what is your full name? You must not give it to him. Names can be things of great power. Although the devil will, of course, already know your name, telling it to him yourself is akin to inviting a vampire into your home. Your name is deeply synonymous with your own inner self. Thus, giving him your name is powerfully symbolic of giving him yourself. If you are foolish enough to make this mistake, all of your protections will be for naught, and he will seize upon your unwitting offer with malicious glee, stealing away your soul and dragging it back with him into hell. At least this way, the police will find a complete identifiable body. As a matter of fact, your vacant shell will be totally unblemished, seemingly having dropped dead of sheer terror. Last, but certainly not least, there's the matter of what happens if you go over the time limit. This is arguably the worst thing you can do. You won't think so at first. The devil will give you no indication that you have in fact exceeded the time limit, and you will conclude the ritual as if nothing had gone wrong. Perhaps, as the devil's image in the mirror trembles and gives way, you'll see a particularly nasty, triumphant smirk flash across his face. But this will be easily dismissed as your imagination. You'll turn the lights back on, gather your belongings, and go to leave the room. But when you open the door, you will see... nothing. That's right, nothing. Just a flat, white void extending infinitely in all directions. Only the room which was reflected in the mirror will now exist. Incidentally, if you turn back around to face the mirror again, you may catch a last glimpse of your own reflection. Perhaps it will even turn and favor you with a smirk and a cheeky wave before sweeping out the door into the perfectly normal church hallway outside. As you may have already figured out, you yourself are no longer in the church. Your soul is now trapped in the mirror, and the devil has taken the liberty of possessing your body, now that you are no longer using it. Pound on the glass and scream all you like, you'll never get out on your own, and no exorcist can help you. But don't worry, it's not like you're in hell, right? At least not necessarily. What you have to understand, see, is that a human soul stripped bare of its flesh is a deeply volatile and vulnerable thing, especially when trapped in the land of the living. You are now an entity of purely mental properties, and as such, the barriers between what is real to you and what is imaginary have been completely dissolved. As you fill that reflected room with your anger, your sorrow, your fear at being trapped, these emotions will begin to coalesce, given form by your mind. If you're not particularly imaginative, these creatures may not be too terrible, may not be able to inflict too much horror and pain. With time, you may even be able to teach yourself to get rid of them. If, however, yours is a mind haunted by monsters, A mind that is vibrantly creative and imaginative and more than usually twisted? Well, there's no telling what horrors might come clawing their way out of the maelstrom, tasting sweet release from the confines of your subconscious, hungering for your terror and suffering. They will refuse to be banished, dragging you kicking and screaming into an endless positive feedback loop of pain and fear. Needless to say, if you're a regular patron of websites like this one, you're probably pretty well fucked. There's only one way to find release from the mirror and the world that you've created therein. They say that if you call to the devil once more and ask him to free you from the mirror, he'll be willing to take you out. For the usual fee, of course. Who knows, maybe if your imagination is twisted and powerful enough to create a personal hell that leaves you begging for the real thing, those talents might be put to good use. There are over 7 billion people in the world, after all. Even the devil himself can't be messing with all of their minds at once. Talented help is always appreciated. Of course, the corollary to your being trapped inside the mirror is that the devil now gets to do whatever he wants in your body until sunrise. At around that time, your body will mercifully drop dead from the strain of the possession. Autopsy will probably identify the cause as some kind of coronary event. Don't get too relieved, though. He's perfectly capable of stirring up plenty of trouble in those few hours. For instance, he may decide to do something big and dramatic, like purchase a large meat cleaver and go on a murder spree, starting with the names in your address book and working his way out to complete strangers if he has time. Or perhaps you'll focus on only one person, someone who trusts you completely, using your persona to get him or her alone and vulnerable, and then... well, no need to describe it here. Once again, I'm sure you can think of a few things. Starting to see why I call this the worst outcome yet? Of course, there's also a chance he won't lay a finger on any of your loved ones, instead deciding to do something a little more subtle, more insidious, like drop off a few nondescript unmarked packages on certain doorsteps in the dangerous part of town, or locate a particular dusty, age-yellowed text in the storeroom of your local library and intentionally misfile it in the young adult literature section, or whisper 7 very choice words into the ear of the distracted-looking young redhead waiting for the 3 a.m. subway train. Or maybe he'll decide that in this age of waning superstition, not enough people are getting interested in his games, and the knowledge of them is in danger of being lost. Maybe he'll decide he needs to get the word out a bit more, do a bit of networking, attract some new challengers. And maybe he'll take a quick peek at your browser history, see where the impressionable, curious minds are hanging out these days. Maybe he'll even write a quick tutorial in modern parlance rather than some inscrutable, obsolete demonological text. Post it on the internet and see how many bites he gets. Maybe I really shouldn't have gone there. But if you've made it this far without shine, a little twist at the end isn't going to put you off, is it, dear reader? I'm sure there are plenty of intrepid adventurers among you with burning questions you'd like answered. And you're all a smart bunch. You know the pitfalls, you know the conventions. You live and breathe this sort of thing, do you not? There's no way you'd fall into any of the obvious traps, right? You're not some Dick or Jane off the street, after all. You'd be bringing a whole new level of competition. You would... Oh, excuse me just a moment. I think I hear someone calling for me. What? You want out that badly already? Must be one hell of an imagination you've got on you. Perfect.
Well, that was... Wow. Oh my goodness gracious.
I love that story.
I
Oh,
could
yeah.
tell.
That, by the way, is entitled The Devil Game, credited to Infernal Nightmare 333.
Ah! Well, they did a good...
I feel
They,
that
they did a very good
I feel
job.
it necessary to shout that out. Yeah.
Yes,
give it an
they
actual
deserve
shout
credit.
name.
They deserve
Oh,
full
yeah.
credit. Oh my goodness. Okay. Whew. I think I got about another 2 rounds worth of stories in me left. I think.
How you feeling, Kintron?
I started dozing off, thinking about, okay, that instruction sounds about right.
Okay. Do you want to go 1 more round or 2 more rounds? What do you think?
Just one more round.
1 more round? Okay. Okay then. Let me see. Okay. Well, this one's another one of folklore and old-time stories, and it opens a little dramatically. I hope you don't mind.
Not at all.
Okay. We gotta drink of water before I start this. Go steady with the oar! Shouted Sheprin Palash, leaning on the rudder. He was foreman of the crew of lumbermen, paddling across Lake Manitou toward the island that would be their winter quarters. The 12 men at their oars had been loudly singing "A Rollin' My Bowl," but the cheerful refrain "A roly poly, my boly roly" had died away the minute the island came into view. The clouds above were motionless. There wasn't a ripple on the smooth lake, yet it was said that even the strongest boats approaching the island were sometimes rocked by something unseen in the water. Windigo Island was a hunter's paradise. Otters swam freely in its pools, muskrats built their mud houses, and beavers their dams with little fear. The Indians never set traps there, though sometimes powerful medicine men would come to the island on secret and solitary missions. The place was said to be haunted by a Windigo spirit. This frightful being may take many shapes. A giant with a heart of ice, a whirlwind, a demon, or a cannibal monster. Most of the men were unhappy about the choice of winter quarters, but none dared challenge the strapping, foul-tempered Sheprin Palash. So they rowed on in silence, listening for they knew not what. They beached the boat on the rocky shore under the spruce and pine. Bawling orders and swearing, Chapron set the weary men to repairing the shanty built the previous year. They worked quickly, aware of the big foreman watching every move with eyes as tiny and sharp as a weasel's. If he saw a man doing something wrong or simply pausing to catch a breath, he would roar, "Hi there! What you doing?" and shakes the unfortunate man until his teeth rattled. If the men who had aroused Sheprin's displeasure were out of reach, he would sound a few shrill notes on the silver whistle that hung from a chain around his neck, and point at them in warning. The men hated the sound of the whistle. The story was whispered around that Palash had bought it in Quebec from the devil himself, who had used it to pipe orders to the sinners in Hades. When nightfall made work impossible, the men settled into the cabin, happy to be away from the pooling dark under the trees, and the sound, so like soft voices, of the rising wind in the leaves. Their good spirits returned when, after supper, Pat Clancy drew out his fiddle, and Jimmy Charbonneau unpacked his concertina. The two played and all sang, but Palache soon put a stop to the merriment, ordering the men to bed and putting out the lamp. Now the youngest of the party was a Cree boy the men called Indian Johnny. The lumbergan had found him half drowned in a river eddy the previous spring. His mother and father had drowned when their birch bark canoe had been swamped by the swollen waters that followed the thaw. Somehow the boy had managed to keep his head above water and swim free of the current. Palache treated him little better than a dog, using him as a servant and scullion. But the other men were teaching him the lumberjack's trade. When the foreman wanted anything day or night, he would pipe 3 short blasts on his whistle, and Johnny would come running. If the lad failed to appear before the whistle was sounded a second time, he would carry the bruises for days. "How you stand it?" asked Jimmy Charbonneau. "Why you never run away?" But the boy just shrugged and said nothing. Jimmy knew that Johnny would never let anyone see him cry. Still, he could see the hatred in the boy's face whenever the foreman appeared. Jimmy had the uneasy feeling that something bad was bound to happen. To his friend Pat Clancy, he said, "Somebody surely die long before the winter's over, long before we left this place." Pat only nodded grimly. One morning, after first snowfall, Jimmy noticed the boy burying something on the shore. Later, scraping away the snow, Jimmy found the body of a rabbit that the boy had caught the day before. Beside it was a little blue tobacco pouch. He didn't hear Palache come up behind him. "Hey there! What you doing?" snarled the big man, shoving Jimmy aside. "That's my tobacco!" he roared, snatching up the pouch. He grabbed Jimmy by the collar, demanding, "Why'd you steal this?" Before Jimmy could say a word, the Indian boy who had appeared from nowhere grabbed Palache's arm. "I took that." "You?" the foreman said, releasing Jimmy and staring at the Cree as though he had never really looked at him before. "Why?" "For the thing that's watching from the trees," said the boy, so softly the big man had to lean close to hear. "What thing?" Palache snarled. Jimmy realized that the boy had left the rabbit and tobacco as a peace offering for the Wendigo spirit. With a small shudder, he glanced right and left at the fringe of snow-dusted trees. "The boy mean the wind..." But Johnny suddenly reached up and stopped him from saying the word aloud. "It ain't safe for told its name aloud," said Pat Clancy, who with several others had been drawn to the argument. "That's the way it come, if it's called by its name." At this the foreman bellowed. "You can all be such fools to believe in the Wendigo." "Don't you say that name some more," yelled Clancy. "Me? I say that name all I want," bellowed Palache. "Wendigo! Wendigo!" Indian Johnny groaned and clasped his hands to his ears. "Enough that!" The foreman dropped the boy with a blow to the side of the head. "The rest you fools get working. I don't want to hear no more this talk." Then he stomped off toward the shanty, while the men scattered to their various tasks. Only Jimmy lingered long enough to help the dazed boy to his feet. But Johnny just pushed his hand aside and walked away. Watching him go, Jimmy felt more sure than ever that there would be big trouble before the spring thaw. December brought record snows. The drifts piled up so high against the cabin that sometimes only the roof and chimney could be seen. Chilling winds hammered it continually. One evening, as Shepron was pulling off his snowshoes and coat, he suddenly began to screech, "I lost my whistle!" Jimmy and the others saw that the devil's whistle and its chain were gone from around Palash's thick neck. He grabbed Indian Johnny and told him, "You must find the whistle and the chain it's hanging by, or don't ever show yourself here again." Before anyone could protest, the foreman thrust the Cree through the door into the snow. Now the wind outside grew louder. "That sounds like something crying all around us everywhere," said Jimmy Charbonneau, shivering from more than cold. Suddenly, the fire in the stove dwindled and died. "Charbonneau, Clancy!" yelled the foreman. "Go to the wood pile before I freeze to death." Palash, for all his bluster, looked cold and white. "No," said Jimmy. "We ain't afraid of nothing, but we don't like taking chance. I hear some wish spirit raising round there," added Pat Clancy. "You don't catch us on the wood pile. No, sirree." Nor would any other man budge from the circle around the cold stove, in spite of Sepron Palanche shaking his fist and threatening each in turn. Finally, the big man dropped onto his bed in the corner and simply glared at his crew. For a long time, nothing more was said. The men shivered and listened to the wind. Each one assumed that Indian Johnny had been swallowed up by the storm, or worse. Jimmy dozed a little. Suddenly, he awoke when he heard something tap, tap, tapping at the window. He turned and through sleep-fogged eyes saw a face at the window. At first he thought it was Johnny, but then he realized the face was too big. It filled the window from side to side, and the eyes were like blue-black chips of ice. He gave a cry, waking the others, but when they looked to where he was pointing, they saw only the frosty window glass, with a crescent of snow like a half smile across the ledge. With a shaking hand, Jimmy wiped a circle in the frost. Beyond he could see nothing but a pine stump in the clearing, like a tombstone rising out of the snow. For a moment he thought he heard, as though across a great distance, the voice of young Johnny. Then the shanty began to shake as the wind slammed it with the force of a hurricane. "The shanty! She's going to fall!" cried Jimmy. Wind howled down the stovepipe, scattering ashes all around. Suddenly, There was a thunderous knock on the door, followed by 3 whistle blasts that cut through the howling wind. "Déjeuner! Fin mademoiselle!" cried Palanche. He jumped up from his bed and yanked open the door. Some men afterward said that the wind and swirling snow sucked him right out. But Jimmy Charbonneau swore that a huge hand made of snow and tipped with nails of ice grabbed the man and dragged him out into the storm. Then the door slammed shut. By the time the lumbermen pulled it open again, not a trace of the foreman could be found. In the morning, when the storm died away completely, the men found Johnny, nearly frozen to death, huddled under the overturned boat. In the shelter of the tallest pine, Jimmy Charbonneau discovered the imprint of a single bare foot, with claw-like toes about the size of a double sleigh. He called the others, but the wind and fresh falling snow soon blurred the outline, leaving only a vague hollow in the snow. Even Pat Clancy thought Jimmy had been imagining things. But Jimmy and Johnny's eyes met, and they nodded to each other. They knew that Chevron Palanche had been carried off by a Wendigo. Again, always tempting fate. These people always tempt fate. What can you say?
Like, listen to the natives. They know the territory better than anyone else.
Exactly. Exactly. It always amuses me when all these things they're always talking about, like, oh, it's so superstitious. Oh, don't listen to that. It's superstitious. It's like, it's there for a reason. There's a reason you do these things.
That's why you don't say the name of the Scottish play on a stage.
Exactly.
Why you don't whistle in the forest at dark in Georgia or anywhere else?
Yes. Exactly.
Oh, which have actually tried, but still.
Yeah. Kintran, you have first story?
I might pull one out of the same book you were just reading from.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, after last Halloween when I went ahead and got them.
Oh, good. Good. They're wonderful books.
They're always reading along with you in yours.
They're wonderful books. I love them.
I mean, you had mentioned looking over where the sources of the stories came, so I thought I'd go ahead and get them and see if I can look up the stories.
Yes, I love that too. I love looking at the sources.
While you're doing the Canadian version, I think I may do the one from Louisiana. If I can do the Louisiana accent. I should be able to. I've always. Once in the Louisiana backwoods, there was a Cajun woman, Odette, who wanted nothing more than to have a child. But God had not granted her and her husband that gift. Sometimes she would be going about her housework when she would pause and gaze into the yard, imagining a child playing there. Her husband, Alcide, would often say, I wish I had a son. That boy, when he grow up, he would be the best hunter in the whole bayou country in the United States, him. Poor Odette spent most of her days in church praying to Virgin Mary. Please let us have a baby for our Sadie, she would plead. I promised I would love that child so. But no child was sent to them. Now, there was a stretch of woods haunted by the evil devil himself. People were safe as long as they stayed on the path that ran through the forest, but they risked their lives and very souls if they strayed into the trees on either side. When Odette was a little girl, her mother had often warned her, as she set out to school, "You be careful, Odette. You keep your feet on the road, yes? Don't you go wandering off after no flower or nothing. You just walk straight down to the schoolhouse and don't pay no mind to nothing else." Now, one spring day as Odette was walking to church along the very road, she spied a beautiful flower growing right beside the path. It had long white petals running the center as red as fine as ruby. So perfect was it that it might have been fashioned by an artist instead of growing wild. A little ways beyond it, she saw another such blossom, and another. "I'll take these to church and give them to the Virgin Mary," she said. "Maybe then she will give me a baby, eh?" So she began to gather a bouquet and didn't notice that each flower she picked up led her deep into the woods. Suddenly she heard a sound like a child crying. Looking around anxiously, she spotted something blue under a tree. It was a bundle wrapped in blankets from which came a child's cries. Instantly Odette dropped her flowers and ran towards it. Swaddled in the sky blue cloth was a handsome little baby boy with skin as white as milk. As she reached down and gently lifted the infant into her arms, he laughed and gurgled in a way that went straight to her heart. "Has your careless mother left you all alone here?" she asked the child, but the baby only laughed and cooed even louder. Then Odette said to herself, "Maybe the Virgin's answered my prayers by sending me to find this child. I'll take him home, yes, and he will be the son for Alcide." With the child gathered in her arms, the young woman hurried out of the woods. But as she entered the road, she remembered that she had not thanked the Virgin for giving her this son. She carefully spread out her shawl in the shade of a tree. Upon this she gently set her blue-wrapped bundle, and then she knelt to pray. But as soon as she had uttered the first words of her prayer, the infant began to yell and shriek. At first she tried to pray in spite of his cries, but he cried louder and louder, almost as if her prayers were causing him pain. At last Odette whispered to the Virgin that she would say her prayer for Thanksgiving when she got home. "Let me get this baby some milk and put him to bed, then I'll say him some prayer more," she promised. So she started to pick up the little one, and she raised the corner of the blanket and covered his face to speak a soothing word to the squirming baby. But when she did this, her heart turned to ice. No perfect infant with skin-white milk in her arms. Instead, she was holding something that was all black and shiny and ugly, like some beetle. But even as she watched, the thing began to grow, getting bigger and bigger by the moment. Poor Odette was so frightened that she nearly died on the spot. She dropped the writhing bundle on the ground, and to her horror she found she couldn't move. Her legs felt like they was rooted to the spot. Not knowing what else to do, she made a sign of the cross in the air over the tangled blanket, from which two shiny black claws had emerged. To her everlasting relief, she found that she had done the right thing. The evil one hates that mark of the cross. The creature that was still half hidden gave a yell like a 40 devils. Then Odette saw something that looked partly like a giant beetle and partly like a little hunched up man with shiny insect skin run off into the woods. As soon as its cries had died away, Odette found that she could move again. Still shaken, she hastened directly to the church where she thanked God and the Virgin for her escape. The very next day, Alcide and Odette moved far away from Bayou Barragara. They made a new life for themselves, and in some time they were blessed with a family of 5 sons and 4 daughters. Odette was careful to see that each child said his prayers day and night and went to church faithfully, and never went picking flowers in the woods.
Oh, that's a good choice.
And yeah, I had to try to do that Lausanne accent.
You did a good job. It's a creepy creature, too, in that one. It's always those stories about the devil in the woods. The dark ones, all those.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And once again, you gotta tell them girls to stay on the path and not go off picking flowers.
Exactly. You might run into a wolf who loves to torment other people with puns and jokes.
Oh, the 6
Well, that doesn't sound so bad.
Ah. Mm. Mm. Okay. Wastes, do you want to close out the evening for us with a story?
Well, I actually have a question. Which
Yes?
would you rather hear? Should I bookend this with my favorite tale from Poe? Or should I go with another devil-related tale to kind of fit with the theming we've been doing here?
What do you think, Kintran? What would you go with?
Rarely ever want to turn down Poe.
Yeah, Poe. Do a Poe.
Poe it is.
Who doesn't love Poe?
Poe family.
The poet, not the panda. Skidoosh.
Chadoosh.
Prue. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived it haunted me day and night. Object there was none, passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture. A pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now, this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night after midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh so gently. And then when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed, so that no light shone out. And then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously. Cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work. For it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone and inquiring how he had passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was, opening the door, little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly, as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch with the thick darkness, for the shutters were close fastened through fear of robbers. And so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on steadily. I had my head in and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watchers in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief. Oh no! It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul and overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it had welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise, when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor, or it is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he has been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found all in vain. All in vain. Because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a single dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot from out the crevice and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness. all a dull blue with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. And now have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses? Now I say there came to my ear a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet, I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous, so I am. And now, at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst, and now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once, only once. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If still you think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men, who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused, information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled. What had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man, I mentioned, was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search. Search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears, but still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definiteness until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice, yet the sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides as if excited to fury by the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh, God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated upon the boards, but the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, no. They heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die, and now again. Hark, louder, 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 louder. Villains! I shrieked. Dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, here. It is the beating of his hideous heart.
Oh my goodness, I love that story. Oh,
It's my favorite for a reason.
I think I've done that one in the studio. It's so much fun too to go all out towards the end. You know?
Oh,
So
I know.
fun in that, man.
Yes, it's so much fun. Ah, but
Of course, I was trying to give you some Foley in the background too. But,
yeah, I heard. I could hear some of it. Yeah. There was a point where I could hear like the beat thing. I was like, wait, what's going on? I was like, what's happening? No. Ah. Well,
That's
gentlemen.
what happens
Eventually
when you
I
have
want
two
to have,
solid
like-
water bottles.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Eventually, I hope to have like my own recording space, and I just want to go all out with it.
Yes. Do it. Oh.
That's one of the reasons I like doing the Raven so much. I will get into it.
Yes.
Yeah,
There are stories.
absolutely.
Poe lends himself so well to going all out. Especially the dawning horror he often does with his stories.
And that's one reason why that one's one of my favorites. Like, I love the stories where the overconfidence is the undoing of the protagonist.
Yes. Oh yes.
It's one reason why The Black Cat is another one of my favorite stories
Oh,
of his.
Yeah,
But I also know
I've never read The Black Cat. I have never read that one.
I do know it's probably one of maybe a difficult one for some people to read because there's
Yeah.
a lot of animal harm in there, which I totally understand. That's rough to read, let alone imagine. But for what it's worth, the villain gets his comeuppance.
Oh yes. I think the one.
Now, thank you,
the-
Julian. Thank you for being here.
Aw, thank you, Julian. Oh my goodness gracious. You know, I think it's getting pretty late. Shall we retreat for the time being from the fire? Close out this wonderful session of storytelling.
I mean, so long as we have no more firewood to put on, and Horace has burned through all the marshmallows, I think.
Horace keeps putting on marshmallows and never eats them. I think Horace is doing that to keep me from eating them because I will eat them. Yulian 20, you should do it again sometime. We should do another reading stream together sometime.
I'd be down for that.
I
This
would
was
be.
fun.
Yes, it was
How
a
was
lot
it?
of fun. Absolutely. What are you two up to in your schedules? Do you have any future streams coming up or anything to look forward to?
Hopefully some possible gaming streams Monday and Tuesday, but then back to American folklore and more fun Chris and Anderson next week.
Oh, nice, nice. What about you, Ace?
Me myself, I'm kind of taking a break from streaming at the moment. IRL stuff is kind of heaping on at the moment. But
There's some good possibilities on the horizon, and hopefully,
if everything works out how I hope it will, I may be returning sooner rather than later. So, look forward to that.
We look forward to it.
To attract new you.
Yes. And I think for my dear scholars, I'll let you know what the streaming schedule is for next week. We will definitely try to finish the Lego Rocket, definitely. And maybe something interesting next Friday, maybe. I'll do a little more announcement when it gets closer. I can't announce it just yet
Waiting
because.
for 6-7 minutes.
What? Wait a second. What?
Said keep it waiting for 6-7 minutes.
Kintran!
Uh,
Okay. All right. So, I better do my goodbye then, shouldn't I? Wait. Who should we raid tonight? Do you have any ideas?
Good question.
Yeah, because I think
Let me look.
most of my people are. Well, I don't know.
Let's see.
Anyone? Any suggestions? You are the guests. I would love to hear your suggestions.
Is anyone I know reading and writing? I don't think so. The one person I saw who was, I think, has stopped streaming at this point.
Yeah. Most stuff I see is a lot of.
Alchementation's doing some Brothers Grimm.
Ooh. Who?
Alchemation.
Alchemation. Don't think I know them. How do you spell them?
It's one that it's one that Michael introduced me to.
Ah.
But he's one that likes to get into the darker Brothers Grimm stuff.
Ah. Well, that's interesting. How do you spell that name?
Yeah, let's put it in chat.
Okay. Oh.
Alchemutation. Okay.
Okay. So. Okay. Well, what do you say? Should we raid them? They're not a VTuber.
I think yes.
But we'll raid them then. All right then, my dear, marvelous, wonderful scholars. I say unto you, good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Till we meet each other again in the camp? Is that what I would say?
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
right now the camp, yeah.
Till we meet each other again at the camp. Take care, and I shall see you next time. Till then, farewell and bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Goodbye.
Just gotta get to the end scene.
Both dreams.
Yes.
for? Yes, I had to do a pun in the other stream too.
Of course. Ah, with that, I believe I will begin winding down for the night.
I don't know, Wes. Is it really safe for you to unwind?
Only when I'm in the sleeping bag,
Okay.
and it's all self-contained.
All right,
Takes me a
well.
while to